Chapter 155. The air was filled with vibrations. At this moment, Jin Guang's vision was filled with violent psychic energy. The unlimited psychic energy gave Jin Guang astonishing destructive power. His output at this moment was like hundreds of cannons shooting in the same direction. The earth-shattering power squeezed and crushed everything in front of him. Li Anping's figure was immediately swallowed by the golden psychic energy. The rumbling sound resounded throughout the kernel. Dust and soil were swept up. Huang Linjun, who was standing behind Jin Guang, was stunned. When he saw Jin Guang's previous attack, he had already judged that his opponent's ability was very powerful. However, he did not expect it to be to this extent. Now that he thought about it, if the so-called unlimited psychic energy was really unlimited, how powerful would it be? Especially after Jin Guang reached the third energy level and his psychic energy could interfere with the material world. This kind of attack that relied purely on psychic energy and was similar to artillery bombardment was Jin Guang's forte. On the other side, Yu Shan and Huang Xia were the same. At this moment, they realized the terrifying power of unlimited psychic energy. Their vision was completely filled with golden psychic energy. They could no longer see Li Anping's figure, nor could they feel Li Anping's psychic energy. This was a naked suppression of violence. Especially this time, when faced with Li Anping, the big devil, Jin Guang subconsciously pushed his psyche chi to the peak and flattened him. This time, dust filled the air and sand rolled back. Jin Guang estimated that Li Anping had been torn to pieces. He sighed in his heart. Oh no, I used too much force. Now, not only is Li Anping going to die, but those four fellows behind Li Anping might also be killed. This is troublesome. I wanted them to give the order to stop Xia Dragonfinch's actions. Just as he was thinking about this, a few seconds passed. When the smoke and dust from the explosion dispersed, a figure slowly revealed himself. Looks like you're that kid with unlimited psychic energy. Li Anping's voice slowly came. When his figure appeared in front of everyone again, everyone was shocked. They widened their eyes and looked at Li Anping in disbelief. Li Anping stretched out one hand in front of him and made a defensive gesture. There were some wounds on his palms, but they had completely healed. On his body, other than some slight abrasions on his skin, there were no visible injuries at all. Everyone found it hard to believe that there was actually someone who could come out unscathed from such a violent attack. How is this possible? Among all of them, Jin Guang was the one who found it the hardest to accept. He was the one who knew the power of his Nianqi shockwave the best. Although he had only used his full strength for a few seconds, even an Iron Man would be smashed into pieces. Now Li Anping was completely unharmed. Just when Golden Light was distracted by something unimaginable in battle due to his lack of experience, it had already become a fatal flaw. He suddenly felt that his body was covered by a figure. What are you thinking about? Boom! Li Anping's kick landed on Jin Guang's stomach, sending him flying into the air. It was as if a thunderbolt had ripped through the air. Then, he threw out a few air palms toward the sky. The white shockwave had already sent Jin Guang flying. Although it was just a casual attack from Li Anping, what kind of strength did Li Anping have now? When he was at Song Bang's house, he could directly kill a level 4 ability user with a full-strength attack. Although he didn't use his full strength now, it was enough to make Jin Guang suffer. Jin Guang spat out a big mouthful of blood in the air. His whole body fell from the sky with his eyes rolled back. Little brother! Save him! Golden Light was instantly killed by Li Anping. A portion of the aptitude users fled in all directions, while a portion of the aptitude users rushed towards Li Anping in the heat of the moment. Stubborn! Li Anping snorted coldly. He opened his mouth and spat out a white line. The white line was like a white waterfall, directly sweeping toward the charging crowd. It was as if a laser had swept through the air. Wherever it passed, no matter what level the ability users were, they all fell to the ground with miserable howls. Some of them had their bones broken, while others had their internal organs crushed. Seeing this, even more people didn't dare to rush out. The remaining ability users all scattered, wanting to escape toward the exit. Facing this situation, Lianping only shouted softly, "All of you stay here." His voice was as gentle as the wind, but his movements were more violent than the most ferocious hurricane. A loud sound suddenly came from under Lianping's feet. The soil had already been split into pieces under his stomp. Meanwhile, he had already appeared in front of an ability user. Then, his body swept past that ability user. The shockwave created by the supersonic speed had already swept that ability user back into the field. Only then did everyone hear the sound of Lianping's sonic boom. Then, Lianping appeared in front of another person. This person's ability was very special. Before Lianping arrived, he had already turned into two identical people, running in opposite directions. However, in less than 0.1 seconds after he used his ability, Lianping had already scattered the clone with a punch. Then, he grabbed that ability user's neck and threw him into the field. Then, Lianping sprinted. The shockwave created by the supersonic speed directly blew back more than 10 ability users who were running away into the field. Then, he took a few steps forward and grabbed Jin Guang, whose mouth was full of blood and was about to fall to the ground. Then, with a strong shake of his arm, he had already thrown him back into the field. At this time, Yushan on the stage finally reacted. Facing Lianping's attack, he understood that there was no way he could retreat now. Even if he surrendered, his opponent would not let him go. He sighed helplessly and shouted, "Do it!" He opened his mouth and spat out a yellow caterpillar towards Lianping. At the same time, Yu Lu and Yu Ping behind him also used their abilities. Together with Yushan's caterpillar, a total of 3 yellow caterpillars flew towards the black figure in the field at an extremely fast speed. In the short 10 seconds that Yushan hesitated and then made up his mind to use his ability, dozens of ability users had already been thrown away by Lianping or blown away by the shockwave. They were all gathered in the center of the field by Lianping. Lianping did not even look at the caterpillars that Yushan shot out. These slow things could not even touch him. He scurried around the field like streaks of black lightning. Wherever he passed, one ability user after another was thrown out by him, and all of them were smashed together. However, no matter how fast he was, the 3 yellow caterpillars were always hot on his tail. Stalking type, huh? Lianping thought. He turned around and punched at the caterpillar. With a bang, his fist landed on the caterpillar. A huge roar sounded. The fist, which was strong enough to turn a tank into scrap metal, landed on the caterpillar. However, the caterpillar did not shatter into pieces as he imagined. Instead, not only was the caterpillar not injured, it stuck to his fist like glue. Physical attacks are ineffective? Then, the second and third caterpillars rushed towards him. Lianping hurriedly retreated. However, as he retreated, he realized that something was wrong. His speed had slowed down by half. He could no longer maintain supersonic speed. What's going on? After Lianping avoided the last 2 caterpillars, he quickly retreated. He waved his arms forcefully but found that he could not get rid of the caterpillars on his hands. Ha 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 ha! Yushan laughed. It's useless. Once you're possessed by the golden-legged worms, your speed will be halved. Unless you defeat me, you won't be able to recover. Everyone, hurry up. He's slowed down now. Kill this dog of the Imperial Court. You're just fast. Let's see what you can do now that you've lost your speed. The remaining ability users saw that Lianping's speed had greatly decreased. After hearing Yushan's explanation, they all became excited. They looked at Lianping with red eyes and rushed towards him like hyenas. If you're fast enough, I can guarantee your safety. I can also hold back a little and use you as research material. Lianping looked coldly at the crowd that was rushing towards him. He simply allowed the other 2 caterpillars to attach themselves to his back. Since I've lost my speed, for safety's sake, I won't hold back. When the group of people saw that 2 more caterpillars had attached themselves to Li Anping's back, they became even more excited and rushed over even faster. However, they had only taken a few steps when they saw Li Anping clenching his fist and raising it above his head. Then, he fiercely punched the ground. Rumble, rumble, rumble. It was as if a magnitude 10 earthquake had erupted. Li Anping's punch directly shattered the entire ground into pieces. Countless pieces of soil and huge rocks sank, while countless pieces of mud and rocks rose and shot in all directions. Everyone felt that the power of this punch seemed to have enveloped the entire col, collapsing the mountain range and the earth. The entire world seemed to have been turned upside down. It was such a direct punch, but Li Anping relied on his immense strength to completely dig up the ground in the kernel. In the air, silent ripples vibrated. More than 10 ability users were shaken to death on the spot. There were also dozens of ability users who were swept up by the uplifted earth and disappeared without a trace. Huang Linjun looked at his stomach in despair. It had already been pierced through by a rock. From the beginning to the end, Li Anping didn't even look at him. He didn't even say a single word to Li Anping before he died silently under this punch. There were many people like him present. Their hearts were filled with regret. Why did they have to go against such a monster? Why did they have to fight against such an inhuman person? Li Anping wasn't human at all. This was especially true for Huang Linjun. He had been avoiding Li Anping from the beginning to the end. He hadn't even declared war against Li Anping in person. The sullenness in his heart was like an ocean that couldn't be vented. He wanted to curse out at Li Anping. He wanted to tell him about how he dealt with him. He wanted to see Li Anping's angry expression. However, he could no longer see anything. He could only feel his strength gradually fading away as his abdomen bled incessantly. Then, a suction force came from Li Anping's body, bringing with it boundless regret. He had already died. After this punch, more than half of the people were dead. Most of the survivors were ability users who had been thrown together by Li Anping. This was because Li Anping had consciously controlled his own strength. The remaining people looked at Li Anping stupidly. They were already completely stunned by this terrifying punch. Those who hadn't truly faced Li Anping would never know just how powerful this leader of Xia Dragonfinch really was. Right now, Yushan and Huang Xia were the most emotional in this regard. This was especially true for Huang Xia. When he heard that Li Anping was able to defeat Song Bang and Lei Di, he thought that Li Anping must have relied on some special ability to plot against them. However, this kind of plot was nothing to worry about once he knew Li Anping's ability. When the time came for them to fight, it would depend on the spirit, strength, and mentality of both sides. However, it wasn't until now that Li Anping had displayed his unparalleled strength and speed, displaying the most primitive human violence naked in front of him. Especially when Li Anping's punch directly changed the terrain of the call, he clearly sensed how strong Li Anping was. He looked at Li Anping in a daze. He didn't dare to have the slightest thought of resisting. The other survivors were the same. When they saw Li Anping walking towards them, they didn't move. They were afraid that any movement they made would cause Li Anping to kill them. The corners of Li Anping's mouth curled up. The punch just now had killed more than 100 ability users. Although they weren't very strong, it had also increased his physical fitness. His current physical fitness had become strength 16, 8 speed 15, 9 and stamina 17, 8. Strength, speed, and stamina had all increased by 0. 1. At this point, the effect of every 0. 1 value increased was many times more than before. Chapter 156. Li Anping glanced at Yushan, who was on the stage. That was the only place his fist hadn't hit. Yushan's ability was very interesting, and would definitely be good material. He said to Yushan, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and remove your ability." being stared at by Lianping, Yushan immediately felt a sense of pressure. He felt as if he was being stared at by a pair of heavenly eyes, and his whole body was being seen through. He mustered up his courage and said, "Lord Li, after I remove your ability, can you let me go this time?" Lianping shook his head. "You're making a bad start. Come back to Tianjing with me." Cold sweat flowed down Yushan's forehead. What kind of treatment would he encounter in Tianjing? House arrest? Jail? Research? He said in a hoarse voice, "Lord, is it really impossible?" Lianping grabbed a piece of rock from the ground and held it. Then, with a light wave of his right hand, he threw the rock directly in Yushan's direction. There was a sharp whistling sound in the air. Yushan couldn't see the shape of the rock at all, and could only smell a burnt smell. This was the smell of the rock rubbing against the air. It could be seen how fast the rock was just now. By the time Yushan reacted, Yu Ping, who was behind him, had already let out a scream and collapsed. A large hole was torn in his chest by the rock, and blood spurted out like a fountain. When he died, one of the caterpillars on Lianping's back also disappeared into the air. "I'm not negotiating with you." Lianping waved his finger at Yushan. "I'm ordering you." "Yes. Yes, I understand." Yushan and the other Yulo hurriedly removed their abilities. The other two caterpillars on Lianping's back also disappeared one after another. He suddenly felt his body lighten, and his speed was restored. After deactivating his ability, Yushan pointed at Huang Xia and said, "Sir, he is an envoy sent by the Wenqi sect. He was the one who instigated me to organize this gathering. He was the one who ordered me to do this behind the scenes." After Yushan finished speaking, the entire audience was in an uproar. Lianping also raised his eyebrows in surprise. Huang Xia cursed inwardly. This trash. His psyche chi shot to the sky with a boom, and he was about to rush at Yushan to vent his anger. However, he had only taken a few steps when he felt the world turn upside down. Countless screams rang in his ears. Then, he saw his headless corpse slowly kneeling on the ground. Lianping swung his arm, and a huge force shook off all the blood on his arm, leaving not a single drop behind. After he regained his speed, he saw that Huang Xia was about to go berserk and injure someone, so he walked up to him and took his head. Looking at the terrified crowd, Lianping said, "Is there anyone else who wants to make a move?" No one said anything. Lianping nodded, "Then come out with me." Just when everyone had been beaten into submission by Lianping, a figure with a head full of blonde hair once again stumbled to his feet. Jin Guang stood up with trembling legs. He looked at the corpses all over the ground, and his eyes seemed to be about to burst into flames. Lianping smiled. "Why? You're still not convinced?" "Convinced?" Jin Guang bellowed. "I'll never lower my head to an evil force like you." His hair stood up, and countless streams of psyche chi emerged once again, burning on his body like a ball of flames. He looked at Lianping and said word by word, "You may be able to defeat me physically, but you'll never be able to defeat me mentally. Justice will never be given up." When he finished speaking, Lianping's eyes revealed an extremely dangerous light. Seeing Jin Guang's stubborn look, he felt very irritated. He crossed a distance of dozens of meters with one step and punched Jin Guang's face directly. With a crack, Jin Guang's nose was broken. However, that was not the end. He had just been sent flying by Lianping's punch, but Lianping grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Then, Lianping punched him in the stomach. He felt as if his intestines were about to break, and he spat out a mouthful of acid. Jin Guang knelt on the ground. The pain made his spirit slack and his consciousness blurry. Psyche chi was the integration of the spirit and the body. The serious injury caused the psyche chi in his body to begin to collapse. Lianping grabbed him by the neck and stood face to face with him. He looked into his eyes and said, "If you surrender now, I can let you go." Jin Guang's eyes were half opened, and he suddenly opened his mouth and shouted, A large mass of psyche chi was spat out from his mouth, and like a shock wave, it completely drowned Lianping's head. When the shock wave of psyche chi dissipated, Lianping's head appeared unscathed, but his face was already cold. With a crack, Lianping had already broken Jin Guang's arm. Jin Guang screamed in pain, and his other hand blasted Lianping's chest with psyche chi. However, it was like an ant trying to shake a tree. In the face of this punch, Lianping did not even move. Seeing that Jin Guang still wanted to resist, Lianping directly grabbed his arm and threw him into the sky, smashing him directly to the ground. With a bang, Jin Guang's entire body was smashed to the ground like a meat patty. He felt as if all the bones in his body were about to break. However, after resting for a few seconds, he struggled to get up again. Seeing him like this, Lianping narrowed his eyes and revealed a cruel expression. "Very good. It seems that you really believe in your justice very much," Lianping said, "but today, I'll let you know that your so-called justice is just your own twisted interpretation of the entire society. Those humans don't need things like justice at all. They need wealth, power, the opposite sex, food, and entertainment. The only thing they don't need is your justice." After saying that, he ignored Jin Guang's screams and resistance, and directly broke all of his arms and legs. After suffering such serious injuries, the psyche chi all over Jin Guang's body kept on dissipating. In the end, he even directly deactivated his transformed state. The scattered people at the side watched with pale faces, and their eyes were filled with fear. However, Jin Guang still shouted loudly. "You can't break me!" Lianping sneered. "You said that I can't break your spirit? Then let me see how strong you really are." He turned his head and looked at the group of scattered people who were still alive. At this moment, these people were like chickens in the zoo. After Lianping glanced at them, they couldn't help but tremble. "Do you want to live or die?" Lianping asked. The group of people became agitated. "We want to live. Sir, please spare us. We were all deceived by the rumors. We support Xia Dragonfinch the most." "Shut up!" Lianping shouted loudly, stopping them from shouting. He took out a dagger from his tactical pocket and threw it in front of Jin Guang. He said to the scattered people, "Each of you stab him once. I can let those who stab him go." As soon as Lianping finished speaking, the scattered people turned pale with fright. Jin Guang had just saved them. This righteous young man who had just entered high school had been doing his best to save them from the beginning to the end. He didn't even care about his own life. However, right now, Lianping had placed the hope of freedom in front of them. "I just need to stab him lightly." The crowd started to get restless, but still, no one dared to stand out and be the first person. Lianping smiled and said softly to Jin Guang, "Your so-called justice is just the weak trying to obtain power, wealth, and fairness. However, they don't have enough power to do these things. Therefore, they are just praying for someone to selflessly help them. But what if you get in their way?" Lianping pointed at the scattered people and said, "If no one comes out in the last 10 seconds, I'll take it that you've given up on this chance." "Wait, sir." "Sir, is there no other way?" "Sir, he just saved us." Lianping didn't even look at them, nor did he care about their discussions and pleas. He continued to count the time and suddenly said, "There are still 5 seconds left." At this moment, the scattered people became even more anxious. Finally, Yushan took a step forward and said, "Sir, can I really leave this place after I stab him? You won't send people to catch me, right?" Lianping nodded. Yushan clenched his dagger tightly and exhaled. He hesitated for a moment before finally taking a step towards the direction of the golden light. Jin Guang's expression changed as he stared at Yushan, who was walking toward him step by step. He watched as Yushan picked up the dagger and stood before him. "I'm sorry, little brother, but I really can't be caught." After saying that, he raised the dagger and stabbed it into Jin Guang's calf. Then, another man walked up. He lowered his head, not daring to look into Jin Guang's eyes. He grabbed the dagger and stabbed it into his thigh before leaving. The dagger cut through the skin and into the muscle. The nervous system sent the pain back to the brain. However, this time, Jin Guang gritted his teeth and didn't cry out. But as more and more wounds appeared on his body, and as more and more blood flowed out of him, his eyes became more and more confused. Li Anping's evil whisper sounded in his ears. Your so-called justice is just these people's delusion about the unfairness of society. They resent the unfairness of society, hate their own incompetence and selfishness, hate their bad luck and laziness, but they are powerless to change the current situation. They lack the determination and courage to move forward. So they can only dream of someone selflessly helping them change everything and solve everything. So when you help them, they will see you as justice, thank you, and worship you. But when you block their path, they will kick you away like a piece of trash. He watched as one person after another silently walked up and stabbed Jin Guang, then stood aside. Jin Guang's heart became colder and colder. He looked at the people who stabbed him, and they all turned their heads away guiltily. None of them dared to look him in the eyes. The whole scene was silent. Only Li Anping's voice continued, and the sound of the dagger cutting through flesh was heard. What these people need isn't justice. What humans need isn't justice. They are weak, childish, and weak. They lack strength and determination. So what they really need is a strong person to stand up and lead them, like a sharp sword hanging over their heads, always watching over them. Just like a shepherd and a sheep. Completely control them, control them. When the 10th person stabbed Jin Guang's arm with a knife, Jin Guang's face was deathly pale. Blood had already covered his body. A few seconds later, he finally fainted due to his severe injuries. The 11th person held the dagger, looked at Li Anping, and asked hesitantly, Sir, do you still want to continue? Li Anping looked at him coldly, and then turned his gaze to the 10 people who had finished stabbing him. Looking at the 10 people led by Yushan, whose eyes were filled with desire and pleading, Li Anping only lightly waved his palm. A white shock wave drowned them all, and their screams echoed throughout the mountain. When the shock wave dispersed, nothing was left. Those 10 ability users had already turned into countless pieces. There was no explanation, no defense, and no one dared to question Li Anping. This was the absolute authority brought by absolute power. Chapter 157. In the test tube filled with liquid, there was Jin Guang's naked body floating. Outside his test tube, there were many busy researchers in white robe. Li Anping and Shirwan were at the side, discussing Jin Guang's problem. Li Anping asked, How are his test results? It's very strange. If I hadn't seen his superpowers with my own eyes, I would have thought that you've gone crazy a few years ago. Shirwan was puzzled. We've done all sorts of routine tests on him, but no matter which test results, they all show that he's no different from ordinary people. There's nothing superhuman about him. If you hadn't told me about his superpowers, I would have definitely judged him to be an ordinary person. So that's how it is. Li Anping gave it some thought and said, It seems that if he maintains his usual state, his body will be no different from an ordinary person's other than his qi. But once he transforms, his strength and speed will increase greatly, and he'll also have limitless qi. That's really great material, Shirwan said with a fervent expression. According to your description, I'm guessing that after he transforms, his body condition will be very different from usual. It's best if we can test him when he transforms. Li Anping frowned. He's not very cooperative. Then let's take a blood test first. That should be fine, right? Sure. Li Anping nodded. Arrange for him to be in a ward. A few hours later, Jin Guang opened his eyes. Before him was a white ceiling, and the smell of disinfectant wafted into his nose. Are you awake? Hearing this voice, Jin Guang was shocked and wanted to get up from the bed. However, He had only moved a little when an intense pain came from his body. Lianping said, "Your injuries are very serious. If you don't want to die, it's best that you don't move around." "It's you." When Jin Guang saw Lianping's appearance, his expression changed greatly. The next moment, his qi surged and his hair turned golden once again. He had subconsciously transformed. It was clear that Lianping had left a deep impression on him. However, as soon as he finished his transformation, he felt a hand wrapped tightly around his neck like an iron hoop. The huge force coming from above made him feel as if his neck would break if he moved slightly. Lianping held Golden Light's neck and said indifferently, "Don't move or I'll break your neck." "What else do you want?" Golden Light said fiercely. "Nothing much, just drawing some blood." Lianping took out a syringe with his other hand and inserted it into the back of Golden Light's neck. He began to draw blood slowly. "Don't move. This is my first time inserting needles." Hearing this and feeling the syringe on his neck, Golden Light really did not dare to move. His voice was filled with hatred. "You bastard, I won't let you go. You won't let me go," Lianping said slowly while drawing blood. "Then what about those ungrateful ability users? How do you plan to deal with them? They..." Many scenes flashed past in Golden Light's mind. It was as if he had returned to that valley where those ability users he had saved had lined up one after another, wanting to use their lives in exchange for their freedom. "You remember now?" Lianping took a look and saw that the syringe was already full of blood. He pulled out the syringe and released his grip on Golden Light's neck, saying casually, "I've already killed all those people who stabbed you." "What?" Golden Light looked at Lianping in disbelief, wanting to express his fury. However, for some reason, he felt a strange sense of elation in his heart. "Does the feeling of taking revenge feel good?" Lianping said as if he had seen through Golden Light's thoughts. "These are the people you've tried your best to protect. Your efforts are meaningless, and your sense of justice is just a pile of trash." As Lianping said this, he walked toward the door of the ward. "Think about it carefully. I'll come look for you when you've thought it through." Lianping stood behind Sherwin and asked, "How is it?" Sherwin's eyes were facing the microscope, and his mouth was filled with excitement. "Amazing, this is simply too amazing." "How is it?" Sherwin turned around and said excitedly, "We've picked up a treasure this time. This guy's body is simply a treasure trove. Give me some time, and I'll give you a bunch of ability user clones." Lianping nodded and saw that Sherwin had once again turned around to continue his research. He shrugged helplessly and walked toward the door, just in time to see Scorpion standing at the door waiting for him. "What's wrong?" Scorpion lowered his head and said, "Sir, the One Chi Sect's emissary is here. They wish to see you." It turned out that after Lianping found out that the One Chi Sect was behind Yushan, after meeting with Xia Dragonfinch, he had immediately gotten someone to issue a notice to the One Chi Sect, ordering them to disband within a week. Otherwise, Xia Dragonfinch would punish them for treason, and all members of the One Chi Sect would be dealt with indiscriminately. "I won't see them." After saying this, Lianping left. Scorpion looked at Lianping's back with a troubled expression. With Lianping's recent increase in strength and the series of thunderous methods after taking over Xia Dragonfinch, Lianping's attitude had also become more and more unyielding. The prestige of ability users in Xia Dragonfinch was also growing. Scorpion hesitated for a long time, not daring to continue speaking. On the other hand, Lianping said calmly, "Scorpion, your heartbeat has become faster. What are you nervous about?" Scorpion gritted his teeth and finally said, "Sir, that emissary said that he has something very important to tell you. He requests that you must meet him." "Something very important?" "Yes, he said that it has something to do with the Fire Dragon Vanguard." Lianping snorted softly. Scorpion only felt that the air was oppressive, like the calm before the storm, making him unable to breathe. Scorpion only felt that Li Anping's strength was becoming more and more unfathomable. Especially now, every move of his was bringing more and more pressure to the people around him. Scorpion, did you receive benefits from the One Aura sect? Your subordinate doesn't dare. Scorpion knelt down and shouted. Li Anping did not say anything. His right leg flashed, and Scorpion was already sent flying across the air. He spat out a big mouthful of blood in midair, and then lay on the ground, unable to stand up. Scorpion, don't lie to me. Li Anping's voice was very calm, but it gave Scorpion a bone-piercing chill. You can receive benefits, but you can't lie to me. This is your last chance. After saying that, Li Anping said calmly, I'll let it go this time. You can leave. Let the One Aura sect emissary wait for me in the base. Yes. Scorpion heaved a sigh of relief. Although 2 of his ribs had been broken by Li Anping's kick, at least he had passed this stage. He sighed inwardly. He wouldn't dare to lie to Li Anping again. In Xia Dragonfinch's base, Lu Wei sat nervously in a reception hall. He was the emissary sent by the One Aura sect. Suddenly, the door opened and Li Anping walked in. He sat down in front of Lu Wei and said, I'm Li Anping. What do you want to say? Greetings, sir. Lu Wei bowed respectfully. I'm here on behalf of the One Aura sect's highest leader. I'm here with the most sincere goodwill. We hope to resolve the misunderstanding with Xia Dragonfinch. That will depend on whether or not your so-called information is enough, Li Anping said coldly. Other than that, you must compensate me for my losses. Lu Wei was shocked. He cursed Li Anping, but the smile on his face became even more humble. Sir, how much compensation do you want? We will definitely satisfy you. 7 billion. Li Anping said a number that Lu Wei found hard to accept. However, he needed to clone 3,000 aptitude users every day. Money was never enough. Since the One Aura sect had sent themselves to his doorstep, he might as well ask for an exorbitant price. That's impossible. We don't have that much money. Li Anping said coldly, I've asked someone to evaluate your assets. From what we've found, it should be 10 billion. But that's assets, not cash, Lu Wei said agitatedly. I know. So, you can sell your assets. You just need to gather 7 billion within a month. You're extorting us. What did you say? Li Anping looked at Lu Wei coldly. Lu Wei regretted his words as soon as they left his mouth. He immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Sir, you can't do this. If you really do this, we'll lose everything. The One Aura sect will only exist in name. What does that have to do with me? This is the price you should pay. Li Anping smiled. Tell me your information. If I'm satisfied, I might lower the price. Chapter 158. My lord, do you know about the recent outbreak of cannibalism in the Western continent? Lu Wei asked seriously. Li Anping's heart skipped a beat when he heard about cannibalism. I've heard of it. The League of Stars and the Imaginary Agency seem to have gotten into a conflict over how to deal with the patients. That's right. Lu Wei said seriously. I heard that the Imaginary Agency's Silvermoon Titan and a level 5 ability user from the League of Stars got into a fight. A few thoughts flashed through Li Anping's mind as he suddenly asked, Is it a Titan? Yes, my lord. You know about it too? Lu Wei was surprised. He didn't expect Li Anping to know about it. Because of the conflict between the two organizations, the League of Stars' operations in the Amist Federation have been hindered. However, I heard that they will immediately rush to the eastern continent after dealing with the cannibalism. Li Anping didn't know what Lu Wei was talking about, especially since he had killed Zui Buxiu in Songbang's house. He knew very well that the Revival Society and the League of Stars had an unclear relationship. He immediately sneered, Your information is useless. 7 billion, not a cent less. I want to see the money in my account increase by tomorrow. If you can't get it in a month, you can just wait to collect your corpses. After that, Lianping walked away, ignoring how Lu Wei was kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy. Originally, he wanted to deal with the ability user organizations in the country after dealing with the Ice Castle. However, since the other party thought that they could take advantage of him just because they had the backing of the Star Alliance, he didn't mind giving them a stab first and letting them bleed. At this time, Lianping suddenly received a call from Lu Feng. The other party told him that the training was almost complete and asked him to come over to check it out. 5 minutes later, Lianping appeared in an office. Lu Feng and Li Qian were standing beside him. In front of him was a man who looked exactly like him. Lianping waved his hand, and that person also waved his hand. When Lianping moved, that person also moved. It felt as if Lianping was looking into a mirror. Not bad, it's quite similar. Not bad, it's quite similar. That person made the same sound, and even the intonation was remarkably similar. Lianping laughed. Interesting. How long can you last? Interesting. How long can you last? That person said with the same expression. Lu Feng added, Tang Weihan's ability is very suitable for impersonating others. Unless it's someone very close to him or someone with a special method, ordinary people won't be able to tell the difference between the two. But there's still the problem of qi. Lu Feng continued, with Tang Weihan's current ability, the technique of restraining his qi can only last for 5 minutes at most. Therefore, he can't show his face in public too much. Otherwise, he'll be exposed. What he meant was that Lianping was only at the 3rd level, and Tang Weihan was at the 4th level. Every time he impersonated someone, he had to restrain his qi. Otherwise, no matter how similar they looked, they would be seen through. During this time, Tang Weihan was sent to Lu Feng to learn the art of impersonation. As De Xia Dragonfinch's master of impersonation, Lu Feng obviously had a lot of experience in this area. Tang Weihan's ability allowed him to not only change his face, but also his body, skin, voice, fingerprints, and pupils. To Lu Feng, he was a genius in this area. In a short period of time, he spent a lot of effort to make Tang Weihan impersonate Lianping. Finally, he managed to train him until he looked like the real person. No problem, Lianping nodded and said, let him be my substitute for this period of time. I have some things to do. If there's anything, call me. Next, Lianping gave some instructions. For example, the criminals caught by the Dragon Sparrow Guards were to wait for him to come back and deal with them. He also told him not to make a move on the superpower organizations in the country. Then, Lianping went to find Zhang Yanheng and forced him to sell a lot of the Zhang family's businesses to raise a large amount of money for the 8th Research Institute. Lianping decided to greatly increase the production of clones. He urgently wanted to increase his strength. In fact, he had already planned to do this when he dreamed of the Amest Federation. He needed more power. However, because he had to save Sun Hao and the others, he encountered the Golden Light and the One Qi sect, which was why it was delayed until now. However, because of this, Sherwin got the Golden Light as a material. Next, he would get the 7 billion from the One Qi sect, which could be said to be of great help to his strength increase. In the next 5 days, Lianping stayed in the 8th Research Institute every day, either harvesting clones or training himself with custom-made equipment. During this time, the clones he harvested were mainly Zhou Kang's clones. Sherwin named these clones Compound Type 1 clones. Because Zhou Kang had 4 abilities, the proportion of clones with abilities also greatly increased. Although they were all level 0 ability users, there were a lot of them. In the first few days, because of the lack of equipment, Lianping harvested about 4,000 to 5,000 clones. Later, after the Zhang family and the One Qi sect's funds intermittently poured in, more and more equipment was available. The number of clones produced in the 8th Research Institute also increased, forming an explosive growth. Until today, Lianping had harvested more than 50,000 clones. This also increased his combat power again. His current physical fitness was 16.9, his speed 16.1, and his stamina 17.9. Among them, his strength increased by 0.1, speed increased by 0.2, and stamina increased by 0.1. Li Anping's strength increased again. On the training ground, Li Anping punched out, and the whole room was filled with a thunderous sound. The air was squeezed by the force like a tsunami, and scattered in all directions. In front of Li Anping's fist, a chest-sized pseudo-vacuum area was formed. In the next moment, the air moved and squeezed toward the empty space again, making a loud crackling sound. Still not enough. Li Anping clenched his fist for a long time, but he was still not satisfied. Although the growth of his strength was already frightening for ordinary people, he still felt that it was too slow when facing the Fire Dragon Vanguard that could come at any time and the League of Stars that was like a sword hanging from a beam. However, as more and more funds were invested, more and more clones were produced every day. According to Li Anping's calculations, if all the funds invested by the Zhang family and the One Qi sect were used up, about 500,000 clones could be produced. However, it was still not enough. Currently, Li Anping's stats only increased by 0.1 after killing tens of thousands of people. Although every 0.1 increment was already very scary, it still did not reach a qualitative change. Unless there was a qualitative change in Shi Wen's cloning technology. In the blink of an eye, 15 days had passed. In these 15 days, to outsiders, Li Anping lived in seclusion and rarely appeared in front of others. He stayed in Xia Dragonfinch's base all day long, and no one knew what he was doing. However, only Lu Xing, Li Qian, Lu Feng, and Tang Weihan knew that Li Anping was no longer in Xia Dragonfinch's base. However, what they did not know was that Li Anping had not left Tianjing during this time. Instead, he had been staying in the 8th Research Institute and was undergoing a crazy improvement. In the training room, dozens of bipedal robots were fighting. The machine guns on their heads were constantly shooting at a figure moving at high speed. Unfortunately, the figure was moving too fast. Not to mention that it was difficult for them to aim at him. Even if they could, with the speed of the bullets, he would still be able to dodge them. The black figure sprinted and arrived in front of the robot. He exerted force with both hands and lifted the robot up. He grabbed the robot's leg with one hand and swung the robot in his hand like he was holding a big club. He then smashed the robot in his hand toward another robot. The whole scene looked like a primary school student lifting a tank and smashing it. The black figure lifted the robot up high as if it was weightless. Wherever he passed, the other robots were all smashed into pieces in just 2 or 3 hits. The robot in his hand had been hit countless times and had long become a pile of scrap metal. In just 2 minutes, 35 bipedal robots were all destroyed. The black figure stopped and revealed his true appearance. It was Li Anping. He threw away the scrap metal in his hand. He said to the walkie-talkie on his shoulder, "Clean them all up?" A voice came from the other side, "Yes, sir." Li Anping did not even look at the ruins on the ground and left, leaving only the metal scraps on the ground. These were the latest unmanned robots developed by Xia Dragonfinch's army. Li Anping directly asked for them to help him train. However, the result was disappointing. These latest weapons were no different from toys to him. They were not even as good as the tanks from a few days ago. At least those tanks would not be smashed by him. When he walked out of the training room, the staff who came in to clean up the wreckage looked at Li Anping with a horrified look, as if Li Anping was a Godzilla. Li Anping did not care and walked directly into the elevator. 10 days later, he had absorbed the souls of 450,000 clones. Currently, his physical fitness had reached 17.8 in strength, 16.6 in speed, and 18.7 in stamina. Although the average increase was less than 1 point, Li Anping's combat strength had definitely increased by more than 10% or 20%. However, He had been staying in the Underground Research Institute for a long time, so it had been a long time since he used his full strength to punch or run at full speed. Therefore, he could feel that he had become a lot stronger. However, as for how much stronger he had become, he still needed to find some targets to measure. However, although he did not know how much stronger he had become, Lianping felt that if he met Song Bang again, he would be able to defeat him very easily. "It's time to go out," Lianping muttered. This time, he had harvested a total of 500,000 clones, among which approximately 100,000 were level 0 ability users. Lianping now needed more and more soul energy to increase his stat. Currently, the increase that level 0 ability users could give him was so small that it was negligible. As for ordinary people, other than being able to recover from injuries, he could not feel any increase in strength. Also, his psychic energy had also increased to a limit. He felt that he was already at the peak of the 3rd energy level, just a little bit more and he would be able to reach the 4th energy level. However, he just could not break through this little bit. There was also something special about the black psychic energy figure. Recently, Lianping could feel that the energy contained in the black psychic energy figure was getting stronger and stronger, giving him a feeling that it would awaken at any time. However, it was still a little bit away. Perhaps there would only be new changes after he reached the 4th energy level. Chapter 159. When Lianping returned to Xia Dragonfinch's base, the entire base had become deserted. The various beauties that had appeared before had all disappeared. Even the staff members who weren't beautiful had disappeared. The entire base looked a lot more desolate than before. Just as Lianping didn't understand what was going on, Li Qian jogged over. "Sir, you've returned." Lianping frowned and asked, "What happened? Where did everyone go?" "Sir, we received news yesterday morning that the leader of the League of Stars, Heavenly Empress, had broken through." "Broke through?" Hearing this news, Lianping was also shocked and asked doubtfully, "The leader of the League of Stars should already be at the 5th level, she broke through again." "That's right, she reached the 6th level," Li Qian said worriedly. "With her current 6th level strength, and a group of 5th level ability users under her, plus the strength of the League of Stars, she is already unstoppable. Xia's higher-ups have already given the order to make full concessions to the League of Stars. If they have any requests, as long as they aren't excessive, we will do our best to satisfy them." The leader of the League of Stars, Heavenly Empress, other than this title, was a mysterious existence that no one knew about. But even so, to be able to lead the entire League of Stars, she had always been considered one of the most powerful ability users on the entire planet. And now, this mysterious and powerful existence had finally taken another step, becoming the first person to reach the 6th level. This news was too shocking, even Lianping found it hard to believe. He took a deep breath and said, "Tell Lu Xing and Lu Feng to come see me in the office, and tell the other soldiers of Xia Dragonfinch to stay in the base. Without my orders, no one is allowed to leave." Next, Lianping walked to his office. Along the way, he began to think about the changes brought about by the news. Suddenly, he thought of Black. When he did not know about the levels of abilities, Black once told him that there were 10 levels of abilities. Later, Xia Likong told him that there were only 5 levels in the world. He thought that Black was wrong. Now that he thought about it, it was not that Black was wrong. It was just that humans had not reached the last 5 levels. Even the so-called 5th energy level was something that humans had only reached in recent decade. Not only were there 5 levels, even the 6th level that the Heavenly Empress had reached was not the end. If that was the case, then the race that Black belonged to would most likely have level 5 and above, level 6, level 7, or even level 8 and level 9 aptitude users. If they really came to human society. Unimaginable. Thinking up to this point, Lianping's mood became even heavier. However, there was no time to think about this now. The Queen of Heaven reaching the 6th energy rank was the most important thing right now. A few minutes later, Li Anping, Li Qian, Yang Guang, and Lu Xing all gathered in the office. Among them, Lu Xing did not know that the Queen of Heaven had broken through to the 6th energy rank. When he heard the news, he was shocked and shouted, "How is that possible?" Lu Feng sat on the side and smiled bitterly. This was originally top-secret information. In the base, only I, Momo, and Li Qian know about it. This is to prevent it from spreading and causing unnecessary panic. Now that you know about it, do not spread it out. Otherwise, it will cause chaos. Lianping sneered. Although most of the people in Xia Dragonfinch did not know about this news, the fact that so many people in the upper echelons had already left meant that they did not think highly of Xia Dragonfinch, and even less of Lianping. Lu Xing frowned and asked, "Have you verified the accuracy of this information? Is it confirmed to be the 6th energy rank? It can't be fake, right?" "I don't know. Even the Queen of Heaven, we only know her name. Before this, we were unable to confirm who the leader of the League of Stars was or what kind of ability she had," Lu Feng said helplessly, "but this news was leaked by the League of Stars themselves, so it can't be fake." Lu Xing said worriedly, "If it is true, then it depends on how strong the 6th energy rank is. But even if the difference between the 6th and 5th energy rank is only the same as the difference between the 5th and 4th energy rank, then the Queen of Heaven's strength is probably unstoppable." "That may not be the case," Lianping said indifferently. "Back then, the first 5th energy rank Donald was also unstoppable. In the end, he was surrounded and killed. The Queen of Heaven reaching the 6th energy rank indeed made everyone wary, but it also meant that she had become a thorn in everyone's side. First of all, the Western Continent's Codex State, a messed federation, and Tyrol might unknowingly join forces to resist the pressure of the League of Stars. Their 5th rank ability users added together should be more than 10. Lianping didn't mention that his strength had increased greatly, even though he felt that his strength was already above the normal 5th rank. But whether or not he could resist the Queen of Heaven's 6th energy rank, he didn't know. Moreover, energy rank wasn't everything. Whether or not the ability itself was superior was sometimes more important. For example, Jin Guang's transformation ability and Yen Bei's collapse ability could both challenge those of a higher rank. Adding on the fact that their abilities restrained each other, the relationship between them became even more complicated. "What about the Fire Dragon Vanguard?" Li Qian asked another question. "Do you think they will join forces with us?" After all, they were also suppressed by the League of Stars this time, right? Otherwise, they would have taken the opportunity to attack us. "The possibility is very small," Lu Feng said without hesitation. "The Eastern Continent is different from the Western Continent. Xia and Ice Fortress have been enemies for generations. 20 years ago, if it wasn't for the League of Stars, we would have conquered them long ago. The accumulated blood feud isn't something that can be written off with just a few words." Lu Xing nodded emotionally. "I'm afraid that the Queen of Heaven reaching the 6th energy rank will only force them to join the League of Stars." They discussed for a while, but facing the unknown 6th energy rank, they couldn't come up with a feasible plan. They could only leave helplessly. Only Li Anping's eyes flashed with a cold light. With his current strength, among the Fire Dragon Vanguard, Zhurong and Bloodseeker's abilities were nothing to worry about. White Short Star, on the other hand, was very troublesome. Once he hid underground, even Li Anping couldn't do anything to him. Then there was the mysterious Hades. He was a level 5 metahuman with unknown abilities, but since he could lead the Fire Dragon Vanguard alone, his strength was obviously not to be underestimated. Li Anping began to browse the recent information about Ice Fortress. With his current strength, it was time to find a chance to attack the Fire Dragon Vanguard. Apart from Hades and White Short Star, he was confident of killing Zhurong and Bloodseeker. If he could seize the time to absorb Bloodseeker and Zhurong, his actual combat power might be comparable to a level 6 metahuman. For the next few days, Li Anping disappeared from everyone's sight again. Only Tang Weihan appeared as a substitute every day. However, whether it was Wang Chang's summons or Dexia's high-level meetings, Tang Weihan didn't participate in any of them. In the eyes of others, this was an obvious sign of weakness and avoidance. Li Anping's family laughed maniacally. "You bastard Li Anping, you finally know how powerful you are. Once the League of Stars arrives, I'll see how you deal with this." On the other hand, the head of the Song family, Song Guozhong, even held a banquet at home, waiting for the League of Stars to come to Dexia to avenge Song Bang. They believed that with the relationship between the Song family and the League of Stars, their status would definitely rise. Some people were glad that they had defected to the League of Stars in advance, but naturally, there were also some who were worried about their future. Wang Chong, Xiao Anren, and Gao Tianwen had been frowning every day during this period of time. Initially, they still hoped to rely on Li Anping to fight against the League of Stars, but now, the news that the Heavenly Queen had reached the 6th level was like a stick that smashed them down. During this period of time, they, including the other 9 royal families, had already withdrawn all their trusted aides from Dexia Dragonfinch. Even Wang Chong began to contact Bromon, the messenger of the League of Stars. However, a few days had passed, and Bromon still did not reply to Wang Chong, making him feel more and more disheartened. That was not all. Although many ordinary people did not know what was going on, the forces of the 9 royal families were gradually withdrawing from Tianjing City under the orders of the higher-ups. It was because all the family heads were worried that the League of Stars and Li Anping would fight in Tianjing City. However, compared to others, Zhang Yanheng, the head of the Zhang family, was obviously suffering the most. As a family that had fully invested in Li Anping, once Li Anping collapsed, their fate would be obvious. In particular, they had just invested a large sum of money in Li Anping some time ago, and their strength had been greatly reduced. During this period of time, the sniping of the Zhang family's assets by various families had already made Zhang Yanheng badly battered. What made his heart sink even more was that he had been contacting Li Anping to see him, but the other party had refused to see him several times. If it weren't for the fact that there were people who witnessed Li Anping every day, the other family heads, including Zhang Yanheng, would have suspected that Li Anping had escaped. Chapter 160. 3 days later, in the Western Continent, in a small town on the border between the Codex Nation and the Amassed Federation, billowing smoke shrouded the entire town, and blood and fire became the most common background. In this small town that looked like the end of the world, a golden-haired woman stood on the street as if nothing had happened. Around her, there were corpses lying on the ground, exploded cars, and dilapidated buildings. It was a stark contrast to the woman's calm expression. Beside the woman, there was a black-haired young man sitting cross-legged. The young man had a delicate face and looked extremely handsome, as if he had walked out of a painting. However, at this moment, the young man's brows were furrowed, and from time to time, a look of pain would appear on his face. No one knew what he was doing. At this moment, a group of monsters appeared in the distance. They were expressionless, but they were extremely strong. When they saw the golden-haired woman and the black-haired young man sitting cross-legged, a bloodthirsty glint appeared in their eyes, and they roared and rushed over. Hearing this, the young man continued to sit cross-legged, not caring at all. The golden-haired woman only gave the monsters a sideways glance, and then she raised a finger. With a point of her finger, a tyrannical psychic force rushed towards the monsters. These monsters were all very strong, and 4 or 5 of them could even overturn a small car. Along the way, he had never met a worthy opponent. But this time, when he was hit by the woman's psychic chi, he was torn apart like a toy by the violent psychic chi. In the blink of an eye, dozens of monsters were killed. The golden-haired woman gently raised her hand, and spiritual flames that were invisible to the naked eye floated out from the heads of the monsters. The woman looked at the black-haired young man and said, "Zhenhai, can you still take it?" Shang Zhenhai shook his head. "I can't, Alliance Master. I've reached my limit. If I absorb any more, I'm afraid I'll go insane and die." The woman called Alliance Master by Shang Zhenhai nodded, and then all the spiritual flames were sucked into her mouth. Like a whale sucking in water, in just a few seconds, the dozens of spiritual flames were all sucked clean by the woman. The young man beside her was envious, but he knew that this spiritual flame not only contained the soul energy of the dead, but also countless memories and consciousness. If the absorber's willpower was not strong enough, and if the absorber's strength was not strong enough, and the absorbed spiritual flame was not enough to suppress the chaotic consciousness, the absorber would go insane. After absorbing dozens of spiritual flames, the woman called Alliance Master, who was also the leader of the League of Stars, asked again, "Zhenhai, how long do you need to digest it?" "Alliance Master, it's about 4 to 5 hours." Shang Zhenhai estimated. "After this round of absorption, I should be able to reach the 4th level. This kind of leveling speed is really too fast. That's too much time." The blonde woman frowned and shook her head. "The source of the infection has escaped into the Codex Nation 2 hours ago. We can't be too far away from him. Otherwise, once he recovers, even I will have trouble dealing with him." Shang Zhenhai nodded solemnly. The so-called source of the infection was the culprit that caused the cannibalism in the Master Federation. According to the investigation, it was suspected that the culprit was an Master citizen who suddenly awakened his ability on the West Coast. His ability was very unique. He was able to release and spread a virus from his body. This virus could only infect normal people, and once a normal person was infected, they would lose their consciousness, but at the same time, they would become extremely strong, as fast as a galloping horse and fearless of death. Because normal people who were infected would have a strong desire to eat other people, the imaginary agency called this infection cannibalism. And those who were infected were called humanoid. The scariest thing about cannibalism was that normal people who were bitten by humanoids would also be infected and become the next humanoid. Originally, after discovering this virus, the imaginary agency directly cooperated with the military to eliminate all humanoids at once, and in fact, they did it very smoothly at first. After all, while humanoids were highly contagious, their combat strength was not high. With the imaginary agency's powerful ability users and the military's advanced weapons, eliminating them was a simple task. But after the first discovery, the situation took a turn for the worse. One of the imaginary agency's ability users accidentally discovered the ability user who spread the virus. Before discovering the ability user, everyone thought that it was just a sudden outbreak of the virus. No one thought that it was caused by an ability user. When the ability user who spread the virus was discovered, he was creating new humanoid. What followed was a series of pursuit and search. But the more they came into contact with this ability user, the more surprised the imaginary agency became. They named the target as X. They discovered that the biggest purpose of X's ability was not to cause destruction. The real reason he spread the virus was to hunt. X first spread the virus. After humans were infected with the virus and turned into humanoids, they would hunt humans madly. Through hunting humans, the humanoids would become stronger and stronger, and when the humanoids reached a certain level, they would return to find X, and X would eat the humanoids. After eating the humanoids, he would absorb their power. This was an unprecedented ferocious ability. In order to prevent X from growing out of control, the imaginary agency directly sent 2 level 5 ability users, Silver Moon Titan and Fierce Tooth Titan, to hunt down X. But when they arrived, X had already grown from the initial 3rd level to the 5th level. To make matters worse, their actions were stopped by the League of Stars. At that time, Silver Moon Titan directly fought with the top operatives of the League of Stars. Titan, who had rushed over. But until now, the imaginary agency still did not understand why the League of Stars stopped them. What they did not know was that for some unknown reason, the Queen of Heaven personally researched X and the humanoids and made a major discovery. The humanoids hunted humans and then offered themselves to X. This seemed to be a method that consumed a lot of energy. But after the Queen of Heaven's research, she discovered that this was far from the truth. Through the Queen of Heaven's fifth-level spiritual force field, she discovered that the soul of the infected humanoids would turn into a little soul fire. Every time a person was killed, half of that person's soul would be absorbed, and the other half would become the new humanoid's soul fire. Therefore, the more people the humanoids killed, the stronger their power and the stronger their soul fire. When they reached a certain level of strength, they would return to X and contribute their soul fire. And the power that X used to absorb and strengthen himself was this soul fire. X's virus, through the modification of the body, affected the operation of the soul. This ability was simply unimaginable. The Queen of Heaven's first thought was whether normal aptitude users could absorb this soul fire. She discovered that with the help of her spiritual force, any aptitude user could absorb this soul fire. Although the efficiency was only about 10% of X's, it was still very scary. This meant that they could harvest the humanoids created by X to strengthen themselves. The Queen of Heaven's ability to break through to the 6th level obviously had a lot to do with the humanoid. This was also the real reason why they stopped the imaginary agency from destroying X. But obviously, it was not safe for X to stay in the Amist Federation. The League of Stars' actions would be suspected by the imaginary agency. Therefore, the League of Stars and the imaginary agency split up. On the surface, they were chasing after X, but in reality, they were absorbing the humanoid's soul fire. However, in order to prevent X from becoming stronger and harder to control, the Queen of Heaven personally led the team and controlled the pace well. Every time, she would let X finish spreading the virus, but before he could absorb the humanoids, she would directly injure him and chase him away, allowing the Queen of Heaven to absorb the soul fire. As for the 300,000 civilians that died along the way, that was not the concern of the League of Stars. They even consciously drove X towards the Codex Nation, which was the weakest of the 3 strongest countries in the Western continent. Shang Zhenhai thought about it and thought, maybe the entire Codex Nation will be sacrificed and become a land of death, and after X is used up, he will be captured, studied or imprisoned. It was at this time that the Heavenly Empress suddenly said, Zhenhai, your ability has great potential. Although it hasn't been publicly announced and entered the ability rankings, according to my estimations, your ability's superiority is enough to rank in the top 5 among the domain system abilities. That is why I brought you here to quickly improve your ability. I am deeply grateful for the League Master's kindness. Shang Zhenhai knelt. Alright, there is no time. Since you still can't absorb it, I will absorb it first. Then, I will chase after X. The Queen of Heaven waved her hand and the entire town was enveloped by an invisible spiritual force field. Tens of thousands of humanoids suffered a heavy blow and were directly flattened by the invisible force at the same time. Then, under the effect of the spiritual force field, tens of thousands of soul fire were directly pulled out and gathered towards the Queen of Heaven like a river of stars. In just half a minute, tens of thousands of humanoids were annihilated by the Queen of Heaven's attack. After absorbing all the soul fire, the Queen of Heaven said calmly, Zhenhai, get ready to go. Next, we will approach X once. However, this body is too weak and can only use 30% of my strength. You must be careful, but this is also a chance to train you. Energy rank is not everything. Actual combat is the best alchemy stone. At this time, the Queen of Heaven's communicator rang. After the Queen of Heaven opened it, a voice came from inside. Congratulations to the League Master for reaching the 6th energy rank. From now on, you will be invincible in the world. Alright, Bromon. Cut the crap. What do you want? The Queen of Heaven said coldly. Bromon fawned on the Queen of Heaven. League Master, because you were busy with the Amaster Federation, I did not receive any orders regarding Xia. I heard that League Master has finally reached the 6th energy rank. So, is it Xia's Lianping? Lianping's evaluation report appeared in the Queen of Heaven's mind. Although his potential is not bad, he is indeed a bit of an eyesore. I will send Yulia and Mammon to help you. After Lianping disappears, you will also disband Xia Dragonfinch and recruit all aptitude users above the 3rd energy rank. As for other matters, you will listen to Yulia's opinion. Hearing that his authority over Xia had changed hands in the blink of an eye, Bromon stuttered. Understood. However, Shang Jinhai suddenly interrupted. League Master, I wonder if you can spare Lianping's life. The Queen of Heaven suddenly thought of something. Right, your father and brother died in Lianping's hands, right? You want to take revenge personally? That's right. Shang Jinhai asked, I wonder if League Master can give this opportunity to me. That's fine. When you reach the 4th energy rank, you can rush over. The Queen of Heaven agreed. She admired Shang Jinhai a lot. With your ability, the 4th energy rank should be enough to deal with him. However, when the time comes, you must listen to Yulia and Mammon's arrangements. You cannot act recklessly. Thank you, League Master. Shang Jinhai was overjoyed. The corner of his mouth could not help but curl up. At the same time, on the snowy plains to the north of the eastern continent, Lianping was advancing towards the ice fortress. He did not know that in the distant western continent, something closely related to him was gradually developing. A creature with a similar ability to him was about to, or rather, was about to turn the western continent upside down until it caused a shocking storm that would sweep across the entire world. Chapter 161. On the snowy plains, Lianping's feet sank deep into the snow. The sudden snowstorm blurred his vision. He pressed the earpiece and said, Hello? I'm almost there. In order to prevent the communication from being discovered, I won't contact you for the time being. How's the situation in Tianjing? Everything is normal. The League of Stars hasn't made any new moves, and the 9 royal families are all watching coldly from the sidelines. Momo's voice came from the other end of the earpiece. That's good. If anything bad happens, Lu Sheng and the others will take you away. Remember, don't be impulsive. Hide and wait for me to come back. Suddenly, Li Qian's voice also came over. Sir. She was silent for a long time. In the end, all the things she wanted to say turned into one sentence. You must come back alive. Lianping was silent for a while. Then, he said seriously, just wait for me. I'll definitely come back. After saying that, Lianping pulled out the earpiece and crushed the communicator with his right hand. The next moment, he soared into the sky. As waves of air swept past, Lianping broke through the blockade of the snowstorm. Then, in the blink of an eye, he broke through the troposphere and came to the stratosphere. The clouds kept changing under his feet. The visibility here was much better than on the ground. Lianping took out the GPS, determined the direction, and flew toward the north. This time, his target was the capital of the ice fortress, Morocco. According to the latest intelligence, the blood banks of the major hospitals in Morocco had a serious shortage of blood supply recently. The city government came out to encourage the citizens to donate blood at the hospital and provided a series of benefits for the blood donors. Thinking back to the 4 level 5 abilities of the Fire Dragon Vanguard, the Blood Demon's ability, blood sucking, could rely on absorbing blood to recover from injuries. Therefore, Lianping and the others suspected that the Blood Demon was injured when he participated in the encirclement of the Flying General. Now, he was hiding somewhere in Morocco and drinking blood to recover from his injuries. More than an hour later, Lianping landed from the sky and came to a gas station. He changed his clothes and boarded a bus to Morocco. After all, it was not appropriate for him to fly directly into Morocco. It was too easy to be discovered. Walking to the last seat and sitting down, Li Anping listened to the Ice Fortress language and took out an Ice Fortress language dictionary. He quickly flipped through it. He had already read 2/3 of the dictionary when he was in Xia. Before that, he had already read the basic grammar and sentence structure. With Li Anping's current memory and processing speed, it was enough for him to finish learning the language before he arrived in Morocco. Half an hour later, Li Anping had completely mastered the Ice Fortress language. All that was left was to familiarize himself with the spoken language. He looked out of the window. There were very few cars on the road, and the models of the cars were very outdated. The rare few houses he saw also looked very dilapidated. Even the passengers on the bus were dressed very plainly. The entire Ice Fortress gave Li Anping the same feeling as Xia 20 years ago. This was the price of war. 10 years ago, Xia broke through the border of the Ice Fortress. Then, under the pressure of the League of Stars, they had to give up the victory that was about to be in their hands. Although Xia unilaterally stopped the invasion, wars were never stopped just because you said so. For the next 10 years, the entire Ice Fortress was fully prepared for war under the pressure of Xia. There was constant friction on the border. The military budget increased year by year. There were many internal conflicts in the country, and the gap between the rich and the poor became wider and wider. Everyone was looking forward to a war to release the pressure of the entire country, whether it was victory or defeat. Just then, Li Anping suddenly turned his head and found a boy around 10 years old staring at him. There was a look of desire in his eyes. Li Anping raised his hand, pointed at the dictionary, and asked in a somewhat unfamiliar Ice Fortress language, "You want this?" "Yes." The boy nodded shyly. His mother, who was sitting next to him, grabbed him and said embarrassedly, "Sir, little Victor doesn't have a chance to go to school. I wonder if you can lend him your book." Li Anping nodded and handed the dictionary over. The boy named Little Victor eagerly took the dictionary and began to flip through it. His mother smiled gratefully, "Thank you, sir." Then, Li Anping took the opportunity to start chatting with the woman in Ice Fortress language to practice his spoken English. In just 10 minutes, Li Anping's spoken English was already fluent. "Sir, are you really not from Morocco? Your Morocco accent is even more authentic than my husband's. He's lived in Morocco since he was a child." The people of Xia all had black hair and black eyes, while Ice Fortress was a multi-ethnic country with blonde, black, and red-haired people. Therefore, the woman couldn't tell if Li Anping was from Ice Fortress or not. Li Anping smiled and told the woman that he had lived in Morocco since he was a child, but had gone south to do business a few years ago. So, he asked about the recent situation in Morocco. 20 minutes later, when they were 5 kilometers away from Morocco, the bus suddenly stopped, and several burly men rushed up with daggers in their hands. They shouted, "Robbery! Hand over all your valuables!" Just as everyone was panicking, Li Anping frowned and blew softly. A few white lights flashed in the air, and the burly men were all knocked out and fell to the ground. Everyone exclaimed. As the woman screamed, she turned to look at Li Anping, but felt the bus shake violently. Then, a gust of wind blew, and Li Anping was nowhere to be seen. Only the dictionary was still lying in the boy's hand, announcing the existence of a strange man. Li Anping got out of the bus and leaped several times to reach the road checkpoint. Ice Fortress had to go through checkpoints every time they went from city to city, and the whole country was on high alert. Everyone was under the surveillance of the state. An ordinary person might not walk more than 100 kilometers out of their hometown for more than 10 years. However, this was of course not a problem for Li Anping. With a little effort, he had already jumped over the checkpoint at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye, and then he headed for the city of Morocco. The entire city of Morocco was about 5,000 square kilometers, less than half the size of Tianjin. Everywhere he passed, Lianping felt only desolation. Long-term militarized management and the tilting of military resources had put a huge burden on the entire country. The streets were full of unemployed people, begging children, and marching students. He could also see armored vehicles patrolling the road. "This country needs to change," Lianping murmured. Then he walked toward the largest public hospital in Morocco. The blood bank there was Lianping's target. With his proficient Ice Fortress language, Lianping quickly became familiar with the hospital and inquired about the location of the blood bank. He climbed to the top of the building, squatted under the eaves, and stared at the location of the blood bank. At the same time, his ears listened to the sounds within a kilometer around him. The sound of people talking, the pain of patients, the curses of women, and all kinds of sounds entered Lianping's brain from his ears. Then, his brain quickly analyzed them and came up with a result. As long as someone came to transport the blood, Lianping was confident that he would be able to detect it immediately. A few hours passed quickly, and Lianping had already seen several blood donation vehicles drive to the hospital and send the newly obtained blood to the blood bank. However, none of them had transported the blood from the blood bank out yet. While waiting, Lianping also killed a robber, 2 rapists, and a doctor who deceived the patient. The environment here was much worse than Tianjin. 6 hours later, Lianping had already killed 12 criminals who had nothing to do with the target, but he still didn't see the target he wanted. Just as Lianping was about to give up and change the direction of his investigation, a container truck drove into the hospital. Several soldiers got out of the truck, violently pushed aside the blood bank staff, and directly moved bags of blood onto the truck. Lianping heard the staff inside shout, "You can't do this. It's been a month. Do you know how many people have died in this hospital because of the lack of blood supply? Put the blood down. We won't let you take it." Then there was the sound of punching and kicking, and a cold voice replied, "Ladies and gentlemen, you are going against this country, against the people who protect you and the people who protect you. Next time, let me find out who is hiding the blood bags, or stop us from working. I guarantee that he won't see the sun rise the next day." Then there was the sound of a door closing and a car starting. A cold light flashed in Lianping's eyes, and he quietly followed the container truck. Chapter 162. Lianping made use of his extreme speed and sprinted under the truck. He then grabbed the truck with both hands and drove away with the truck. Along the way, the truck went to several other hospitals in downtown Morocco and forcibly transported all the blood from the blood bank. Then, it began to drive toward the suburbs outside the city. Along the way, Lianping used his hearing to its fullest and listened to the conversations of the staff on the container truck. With his extraordinary hearing and his familiarity with the language of the ice castle, he was able to hear the conversation in the car clearly. However, the people on the 2 container trucks did not seem to know about the metahumans or even the Bloodseeker. They only knew that the truck was going to an Ice Fortress aristocrat's fief. As for why the blood was transported and who the aristocrat was, they had no idea. Lianping had no choice but to hide under the car and follow the container truck all the way. After a bumpy ride, the container truck drove into a manor. Then, the soldiers began to inspect the truck. One of the soldiers shone a flashlight at the bottom of the truck. A white light swept all the way to the bottom of the truck. There was nothing there. Lianping had already crawled out from under the truck with his superhuman speed. The soldiers who were inspecting the truck could only feel a gust of wind sweeping past them. They could not see anything. A gust of wind was nothing out of the ordinary for the people of the Ice Fortress who lived in ice and snow. When Lianping went out, he glanced around and found that the truck was currently parked in a square. There were soldiers patrolling all around the square. In addition, there were several similar trucks parked next to the truck. Just as Lianping was observing, another truck drove in from outside the square. Obviously, there was more than one truck transporting the blood. Seeing this, Liamping was even more certain that this batch of blood was used to heal the Bloodseeker. Thinking of this, he became even more cautious. He hid in the shadows outside the square and tried his best to restrain his psychic energy. According to the previous information, when the Bloodseeker last appeared, White Short Star and Jurong were both by his side. If the Bloodseeker was healing now, it was very likely that White Short Star and Jurong were there too. Although he might not necessarily be able to defeat the three of them together, it was still better to avoid being besieged if he could. It would be even better for Liamping if he could secretly absorb the heavily injured Blood Demon and then find White Short Star and Jurong. Liamping cautiously moved between the shadows. Originally, with his speed, no one would be able to notice him even if he kept running around. However, that would cause a gust of wind, which was a huge flaw. Therefore, Liamping would rather reduce his speed in exchange for the chance of being discovered. After all, he might have to face 3 level 5 ability users now, so he couldn't be too careful. Perhaps victory and defeat were accumulated in such small details. However, the Ice Fortress was far behind Xia in terms of technology. Although the manor he was in had been armed into a military camp, its defensive measures were still far behind. They all relied on manpower, spies, and military dogs. If it was an underground base like Xia Dragonfinch's, it would have all kinds of infrared, weight detection, thermal vision, electromagnetic detection, and so on. If Liamping wanted to sneak in, it would be much more troublesome. Now, even if Liamping did not rely on speed, he could still move very quickly in the shadows with his agile movements. Then, he directly found a corner house. Then, he hid in the ventilation pipe. He planned to wait until nighttime to start searching the entire manor. At the same time, he could also use his superhuman hearing to gather information. A few hours later, it was already midnight. The moon in the sky was also covered by layers of dark clouds. Even though the manor had many spotlights on, there were still large areas covered by shadows. This made it very convenient for Liamping to sneak in. In only 15 minutes, combined with the information he heard during his break, he had already familiarized himself with the manor's general structure. There was no news of White Short Star, the Bloodseeker, or Jurong. However, the main building in the middle of the manor was very suspicious. Every batch of fresh blood had to be sent there in the end. Liamping stood on a wall and carefully looked at the main building, looking for a suspicious place to invade. At the same time, in the underground space of the manor's main building, a feast of fresh blood was in progress. The underground space was about 1,000 square meters in size. There were huge stone pillars everywhere, and it looked like a huge palace. In the middle of the palace there was a steaming hot pool. Although it was called a pool, it was not water inside, but blood. Blood was constantly churning in the pool, as if something terrible was hiding in the pool and spying on the human world. This churning pool of blood was like a passage to the netherworld, and it gave people a feeling of unease. And right above the pool of blood, on the roof of the palace, was a circular passage. Every once in a while, a large amount of blood would be poured down from the passage and merged into the pool of blood. No one knew how deep the pool of blood was. No matter how much blood was poured in, it never filled up. With so much blood in the pool, the unique smell of blood should have filled the underground palace. However, not only was there no smell of blood in the underground palace, but it was also filled with a special sweet fragrance, which made people feel infatuated. And next to the pool of blood there was a huge bed. The bedding and decorations on the bed were all blood red. A perfect snow-white body was lying on the bed. It was a beautiful young woman. At this moment, her eyes were lifeless, and there was a strange smile on her face. It was as if she was in a strange dream. A slender, golden-haired man was sitting on top of her, and he kept moving up and down. Then, with a low growl and trembling for a few seconds, the man lay on top of the woman and bit her neck. Under the effect of the sweet fragrance, the woman who was bitten on the neck did not resist at all. Instead, she hugged the man with both hands and legs, and there was an extremely satisfied and blissful expression on her face. A few minutes later, the woman's face was ghastly pale. However, the golden-haired man continued to suck until there was not a single drop of blood left. Only then did he stand up with a satisfied expression. Looking at the dried corpse on the bed, the man revealed a disgusted expression. He lifted his leg and kicked the woman into the pool of blood. The woman's corpse drew an arc in midair and fell into the pool of blood. A few seconds later, the pool of blood boiled, and the corpse kept disintegrating at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, the woman turned into nutrients for the pool of blood and disappeared without a trace. The golden-haired man walked toward the pool of blood lazily, and then jumped in. The pool of blood that was enough to dissolve a corpse was of no threat to him at all. After sinking into the pool of blood for a few seconds, the man floated up. He then leaned against the edge of the pool of blood leisurely, enjoying the power in the pool of blood as it repaired and strengthened his body bit by bit. Just as the man revealed an expression of enjoyment and moaned, a deep voice rang out in the spacious hall. "Blood demon, the Lord wants me to ask you how your injuries are." The blood demon, who was the golden-haired man lying in the pool of blood, replied lazily, "White short star, do you know how much of a wet blanket you are?" Following the blood demon's reply, a huge face that was completely formed from mud and stone rose from the floor of the palace. He looked at the blood demon and spoke again with a deep voice, "The amount of sex you've used in the past month has exceeded the stipulated amount. The Lord wants you to stop this immediately until next month." The blood demon smiled disdainfully and said, "Don't use the Lord of the Abyss to pressure me. Isn't it just the death of a few dozen women? A few hundred years ago, when our Lambo ruled this land, let alone a few dozen women, even a few thousand or tens of thousands of women could be killed with just a word. I've really had enough of the time I was with you guys. Now that I'm enjoying myself, you guys want to interfere?" The stone face replied calmly, "I've already brought the order. If you don't follow it, then wait for the Lord's fury. Also be careful. Although Xia is no longer a threat, the Queen of Heaven has reached the 6th level. This time, the plan to suppress Xia together with the League of Stars will probably have to be modified. The Lord wants you to meet us at the base as soon as possible after your injuries are healed." Then, the stone face quickly retreated into the ground and disappeared without a trace. The blood demon in the pool of blood snorted coldly and wanted to express his dissatisfaction. However, when he thought of the terror of the Lord of the Abyss, he decided to temporarily stop using sex for this month. When he sank his body into the pool of blood again and enjoyed the warmth it brought to him, he didn't notice that a terrifying monster had already broken into the main building and was attacking in the direction of the underground palace. Chapter 163. In one of the air vents in the manor's main building, Li Anping was quietly looking at the corridor beneath his feet. Troops after troops of soldiers passed by the corridor, but Li Anping did not move at all. He continued to listen and wait patiently. 10 minutes later, a soldier passed by under the air vents while holding onto his stomach. At the instant he passed by the air vents, a black shadow flashed by. Before that soldier could say a word, he was dragged into the air vents by Li Anping. From the moment he crashed into the panel of the air vents, to grabbing the soldier and dragging him in, to finally crashing into the panel, not even 0.5 seconds had passed. 1 minute later, Li Anping, who had once again appeared in the main building, had changed into an ice fortress military uniform. He lowered his cap and walked toward a corner of the house. Although he had been able to sneak around in the house with his superhuman back, there were still quite a few places that had no blind spot. Even Li Anping would find it hard to enter without being discovered. Therefore, he had chosen to use his disguise to scout out those places that he had not been able to go to previously. Lianping walked to a blind spot in the corridor and knocked on the wall opposite him with his finger. He then pressed his ear against it and listened carefully. He frowned and thought, I can't hear anything at all. Did they use some sort of soundproofing means like vacuum glass? Through his earlier observation after sneaking around and disguising himself, Lianping used his powerful observation and calculation abilities to observe the thickness of the wall and the size of the room. He sensed that in the center of the house, there was a hidden column-shaped space from the first floor to the third floor. This space was right behind the wall in front of Lianping. Just as Lianping was wondering if he should punch a hole through the wall, he suddenly turned his head and frowned. Earlier, he had heard a lady's scream coming from one of the rooms on the third floor. Right now, in one of the bedrooms on the third floor, a red-haired young lady was being pressed down on the bed by a soldier. The soldier wanted to rip off her clothes, but the young lady refused to let him do so and kept on struggling. In the corner of the room, there were a few young ladies who were trembling as they looked at the soldier in terror. Suddenly, the door to the room was knocked open, and another soldier rushed in, grabbing the soldier on the bed. Do you want to die? These are all wanted by the higher-up. Anyway, there's enough for this month. So what if I use up one? I can just find another one next month. F***ck, I've been waiting here all day. I'm about to suffocate. Immediately, the two of them started fighting. The girl on the bed screamed and ran to the corner of the room. She hid with a group of girls and watched the two soldiers fight with each other. As a result, the soldier who entered the room later was punched in the back of the head by another soldier. His vision turned black and he fainted on the ground. The remaining soldier sneered and then looked at the women in the corner with a lewd smile. Motherf***, I've been guarding this place for more than 2 years. I'm almost sick from holding it in. Those bastards at the top only know how to oppress soldiers like us. Today I'll have a good time. As he spoke, he slowly walked towards the women. However, after taking a few steps, he heard the sound of the door opening and closing behind him. Who? He turned around vigilantly, but he could only see a black shadow flash by. He had already lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Lianping glanced at the women and directly walked over to each of them and knocked them out. Then, he carried the soldier who wanted to rape to the bed. Then, he began the cruel interrogation. Lianping wiped his hands and muttered, It's been a long time since I've personally interrogated someone. Next, he first tore a piece of cloth and put it in the soldier's mouth. Then, he slapped the soldier awake. Next, he began all kinds of inhumane interrogation. From mental and verbal oppression to physical injuries, Lianping also obtained all kinds of important information from the soldier. According to him, this manor belonged to an unknown noble. The garrison here didn't know who this noble was. They had never even met him. These soldiers were sent here 2 years ago to guard this place. What they had to do was to guard this place and prevent ordinary people from harassing them. At the same time, there would be trucks delivering blood and feces every month. They had to be transported underground through a secret pipeline in the center of the main building. As for what the underground pipeline looked like and what was inside, no one knew. However, recently, for some reason, the amount of blood and feces delivered was much more than usual. When Lianping heard this, he was 90% sure that the blood demon was hiding under the main building to heal himself. However, Lianping wasn't sure if Zhurong and the others would help him. Regardless of whether he was sure or not, he had to go down. Otherwise, the longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for Lianping. Thus, Lianping once again came to the wall in the blind spot. This time, he didn't hesitate. He directly took out a high-frequency dagger and dug a small hole in the wall with a few slashes. This high-frequency dagger was much weaker than the high-frequency dagger. However, due to its small size, it was easy to carry around and wouldn't be easily discovered. Thus, Lianping had brought it with him to the ice fortress this time. Normally, cutting through the wall like this wouldn't make much noise. However, the underground palace where the blood demon was in was completely empty. Other than the sound of the blood pool churning, there was no other sound. Although the sound of Lianping cutting through the wall was extremely soft, the blood demon heard it clearly. Soaking in the blood pool, the blood demon lazily opened his eyes and looked up in surprise. "What's going on? Didn't I say that there's no need to arrange any more feces today? There's an expert." In the next moment, the blood demon's expression changed drastically. He turned into a blood shadow and flew out. The entire blood pool was enveloped by a white shockwave. Large amounts of blood splattered out, covering the ground. The blood in this blood pool was different from ordinary blood. It was unknown what kind of nature it had. After it landed on the ground, it evaporated into the air within a few seconds. Seeing the blood that he had painstakingly gathered being wasted like this, the blood demon felt as if his heart was bleeding. He let out a sharp cry and tapped out with a finger. A stream of blood light flashed, and several hundred blood flames the size of fireflies charged out toward the black figure that was descending from midair. Lianping, who had descended from the pipe, let out a cold snort. Exerting force with his feet, he charged toward the blood demon in the distance with a wave of air currents. At a speed that surpassed the speed of sound, the entire world slowed down once again. Lianping charged toward the blood demon, still having the time to turn his head and take a look at the destroyed blood pool. When he saw this blood pool, a hint of gloominess appeared in his eyes, and he increased his speed once again. In Lianping's eyes, the entire world seemed to have slowed down even more. He could clearly see the blood flames that were shooting toward him inch by inch. He could also see the blood demon's ferocious expression and the flickering red glow on his body. In less than 0.1 seconds, Lianping had already arrived before the blood demon. Then, he punched toward the blood demon's head. Lianping, who was attacking at full speed, was so powerful that he could even blow up a mountain. Moreover, in order to kill the blood demon, who was a level 5 ability user, he did not hold back at all. If this punch were to land on the ground, it would probably cause a small-scale earthquake. Faced with Lianping's supersonic speed, the blood demon had no time to react at all. His head exploded with this punch. His entire head shattered like a watermelon, turning into countless pieces that shot out in all directions. At this moment, a series of violent explosions rang out in the air. It was as if a missile had exploded in an underground palace. Under Lianping's immense strength, the air was directly pushed away, turning into countless hurricanes that blew in all directions. Then, they crashed into the walls, creating a series of crackling sounds. The blood demon's headless corpse was directly blown away by the hurricanes and fell to the ground, motionless. Chapter 164. Lianping saw that the blood demon's body was not moving, but he did not relax. This was because he did not feel that he had absorbed any soul. This was the best way to confirm whether the target was dead or not. Lianping walked step by step toward the corpse on the ground. Suddenly, the corpse exploded with a bang. Then, countless palm-sized blood-red bats flew around and filled the entire underground palace. The blood demon's voice came from the bats. Sometimes it was one bat that spoke, and sometimes it was another bat that spoke. "Lianping, you dare to attack me? Ha ha ha, you have a mutated ability, right? Such a strong body. I originally wanted to ask Xia to hand you over and let me drink your blood. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me." The blood demon's voice was erratic, and it came from the bats. Lianping's expression did not change. When the blood demon finished speaking, he suddenly moved and flew in front of the bat that had spoken. He threw a punch and a hurricane raged. Lianping's punch had already pierced through the bat. "Haha, it's useless." The bat was shattered by Lianping's punch, but the blood demon's voice continued to ring out. Today, I will suck your blood dry and kill you. Thousands of blood-red bats rushed toward Liamping from all directions. They were like a blood-red cocoon that wanted to envelop Liamping. Faced with the blood-red bats that were rushing toward him, Liamping waved his hands and created a series of afterimages. It was as if hundreds of thousands of punches were thrown in all directions at the same time. Dozens of blood-red bats fell from the air. Because Liamping's speed was too fast, it looked like a large number of bats were falling at the same time. From afar, it looked like there was an invisible line around Liamping. All the blood-red bats that crossed the line were killed with one punch. However, no matter how many blood bats Liamping killed, more blood bats would emerge from the blood pool and surround him. Seeing this situation, Liamping coldly snorted. His body emitted a series of crackling sounds, and the surrounding astral winds exploded. His strength surged, and his fists once again blasted out in all directions. But this time, his strength and speed had clearly increased by a knot. Every punch was accompanied by surging fist winds, blasting out streaks of white air shockwaves. The blood-colored bats that charged over were killed before they could even get close. Within a few seconds, all the blood-red bats around Liamping had been wiped out. Then, Liamping took a step forward and arrived at the blood pool. With a roar, he threw a punch at the edge of the blood pool. There was a loud rumble. Liamping's punch seemed to have frozen the space around him. All the blood bats around the blood pool were reduced to dust by Liamping's punch. However, at the next moment, even more blood-colored bats dashed out from the blood pool, once again filling up the entire underground palace. Every bat let out a piercing laugh, as if mocking Liamping's helplessness. Seeing this scene, Liamping's brows furrowed. He thought, killing these blood bats won't really hurt him? Are these bats formed from his powers, or are they part of his actual body? No, he's using the blood bats to deplete my powers. As he pondered, Liamping saw the blood bats swarming toward him once again. Unlike before, he did not expend his energy to kill them all. Instead, he dashed out and dodged the blood bat. Wherever he passed by, countless blood bats would be smashed, crushed, and turned into pieces by the tremendous force. In the blink of an eye, Liamping had already circled the underground palace once. More and more blood bats were chasing after him. Although they could not catch up to him with his speed, as the number of blood bats increased, the space in the palace became smaller and smaller. Sooner or later, these blood bats would fill up the entire palace. After circling the palace once, Liamping could clearly observe the entire palace's environment. There are only blood bats in the entire palace? I can't find anything similar to his actual body. Does this mean that these blood bats are really his actual body? Or has his actual body been hiding in one of the blood bats from the start? Liamping thought about it and rejected this idea. If the blood demon's actual body had been hiding in the blood bats from the start, then he would have already killed all the blood bats at the start. It would be impossible for him to hide in such a spacious palace. Suddenly, Liamping turned his head toward the blood pool. He recalled the scene where the blood demon's headless corpse had turned into countless blood bats. So that's how it is. From the start, his body was a clone formed by blood bats. With a loud bang, Liamping had already charged into the blood pool. In the red sea of blood, a figure was hiding at the bottom of the pool. Found you! Liamping raised his right fist high and smashed it down. Boom! The entire blood pool was blasted open by an invisible force. All the blood in the pool was split to the left and right by Liamping's fist. The overflowing blood on the surface of the pool scattered to the ground. With one punch, the blood demon's figure at the bottom of the pool was revealed. The blood demon stared blankly at Liamping. Before he could react, Liamping had already appeared in front of him with a flash. Die! In his blurry state, the blood demon could only see Feng Xinjian's mouth moving as if he was saying this. In the next moment, a torrential storm of attacks followed. Boom, 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 boom. Amidst the blood light, the blood demon was sent flying from the bottom of the blood pool. Before he could react, Liamping had already sent him flying from the bottom of the blood pool to the air above the blood pool. Each punch was like a thunderbolt. The blood demon's chest and stomach were filled with various dents and wounds. All his ribs were broken. It was only at this moment that he subconsciously raised his hands to block his chest. Immediately after, Liamping threw over 20 punches consecutively. The immense power was like a huge hammer, smashing down on the blood demon's hands in front of his chest. The power that he had gathered in a hurry was not enough to fend off Liamping's ferocious attacks. Boom! Another punch landed. The blood demon's hands were completely deformed, and Liamping's punches pierced into his chest as if they had been embedded. Then, Liamping disappeared from the blood demon's sight. In the next moment, an astonishing amount of mental energy gathered behind the blood demon. It was only at this moment that the blood demon finally reacted from the series of attacks. He no longer had the time to think about how Liamping could discover his tracks so quickly, how he could see through his true form so quickly, and how he could have such great strength and speed even though he was only at the 3rd level of energy rank. Also, he had already called for White Short Star, Pluto, and the others. Would they be able to rush over in time? At this moment, his body was shrouded by the shadow of death. Liamping, who was merely at the 3rd level of energy rank, under this series of attacks, he wanted to kill the blood demon in one go. Who do you think you are? Thinking of this, the blood demon subconsciously wanted to unleash his mental energy and ability. However, before he could do anything, a bone-piercing pain from his back entered his mind. It was a feeling that was much more painful than all the previous attack. Ah! A scream of agony rang out. Liamping's punch had already pierced through the blood demon's stomach. Then, he pulled his hand back, drawing a bloody arc in the air. In his hand were large chunks of internal organs. Liamping squeezed them hard and threw them to the ground, turning them into a pile of mush. The blood demon had never encountered such a situation before. His eyes were red and he suddenly let out a scream. He was unable to fight back at all, and could not even touch the corner of his opponent's clothes. A blood flame shot up into the sky and covered the blood demon's entire body. This blood flame used blood as fuel. When it spread to the enemy's body, it would use the enemy's blood as fuel and burn continuously until the enemy's blood was sucked dry. It was an extremely vicious ability. However, facing this terrifying flame, Liamping suddenly charged forward and once again appeared in front of the blood demon. He directly punched the blood demon between his eyebrows. With a boom, the blood demon's entire head exploded. At the same time, a large amount of blood flame spread to Liamping's arm. Liamping did not even frown as he pressed one hand on the blood demon's shoulder. Boom! Blood light shot out in all directions, and the blood demon's body was pressed down toward the ground by the 5 steel-like fingers like a lead ball. The intense collision caused the ground to crack. The blood demon, who bore the brunt of this force, was now in tatters. There was not a single piece of undamaged flesh on his body. However, Liamping did not seem to be in a good state either. The right arm he was holding onto was completely covered in blood flames, and sizzling sounds of burning flesh kept ringing out. However, Liamping's expression did not change at all. He took out the high-frequency dagger with his left hand and slashed it lightly, cutting off the blood demon's entire right arm from the shoulder. The severed arm fell to the ground. The blood flames on it lost the nutrients provided by the blood and were extinguished a few seconds later. Only the charred arm was left. On the other side, a large amount of blood gushed out from the blood pool and came to the blood demon's side to be absorbed. The injuries on his body also recovered rapidly with the help of the blood. Liamping stretched out his only left arm, grabbed the high-frequency dagger, and charged toward the blood demon on the ground once again. "I'll take your life while you're down. I'll kill you in one go." Chapter 165. The air was filled with the pungent smell of blood, and red bats filled the sky as they charged toward Lianping. However, these blood bats were too slow before Lianping's unparalleled speed. In the world of extreme speed, Lianping walked step by step toward Bloodseeker, who had fallen to the ground. With his superhuman speed, no matter how many blood bats there were in front of him, he could still dash through the tiny gaps between them. There were only a few spots that were completely blocked by the bloodbat. Lianping had no choice but to charge through them. However, with his astonishing strength, the result of his collision with the bloodbats was that they were smashed into pieces. When Lianping arrived in front of the Bloodseeker, the latter's body was still enveloped by the red blood flames. The high-frequency dagger in Lianping's left hand slashed across the Bloodseeker's body with a force that could tear through everything. Even the blood flames on the Bloodseeker's body were forced to open up a clear path. The first slash severed both of the Bloodseeker's broken arms. Then, the second slash cut open the Bloodseeker's chest, revealing the squirming lungs and heart. The high-frequency dagger stabbed into the Bloodseeker's heart, and a series of red sword gleams lit up where the Bloodseeker's heart was like a small light bulb. Just like that, Lianping crushed the Bloodseeker's heart into powder. At that moment, the surrounding blood bats finally flew over, pouncing toward Lianping from all directions. Lianping snorted coldly, and the high-frequency dagger was stabbed into the Bloodseeker's lungs. Then, Lianping grabbed the Bloodseeker's shoulder with his empty left hand. Then, before the blood bats could surround him, he kicked the Bloodseeker and sent him flying. In the next second, just as the tens of thousands of blood bats were about to drown Lianping, he had already turned into a black line and caught up with the blood demon, who had been sent flying by the kick. As the two of them crossed paths, the blood demon's body once again exploded with several tens of blossoms of blood. He had been attacked countless times by Lianping in an instant. Lianping's speed seemed to have broken blood demon's understanding of the speed of ability users. He had never seen anyone who could be so fast. Even Song Bang could not compare to Lianping. From the beginning to the end, Blood Demon had only managed to injure Lianping with the blood flames protecting his body. He hadn't even been able to launch a single attack. Because his opponent's speed had completely exceeded his perception, he could only passively take the beating. At this moment, the loud noise from the battle had attracted the attention of the people above. The fully armed soldiers stationed in the manor rushed to the square in front of the main building and gathered. A gate leading to the underground was opened in the square. This passageway leading to the underground palace was usually completely sealed off. If it wasn't for the fact that the commotion underground was too great, and that the blood demon had sent out a distress signal the moment he saw Lianping, they definitely wouldn't have dared to open up this passageway. Less than 2 minutes after they had gathered, other than his hands, the blood demon's legs had also been torn off by Lianping. However, the blood demon, whose arms, legs, head, and heart had all been shattered, was still alive. The blood in the entire palace and the blood aura in the air were all supporting his life. Lianping wasn't having a good time either. In order to fend off the blood demon's blood flames, he had been using his remaining left hand to attack. However, even so, his left hand had already been charred black by the blood flames, which were slowly approaching his body. These blood flames were very special. As long as there was blood, they could burn even without air. They wouldn't even be affected by water. Lianping could only helplessly stop attacking and make use of the time to heal his injuries. The moment he stopped attacking, more and more blood bats in the underground palace screeched excitedly. All of them rushed toward him with bloodshot eyes. Facing the swarm of blood bats, Lianping smiled faintly. He leaped up lightly and raised his right leg. A whip kick came down from above like a thunderbolt. Swoosh! At the same time the whip kick landed, the ground seemed to have been split open by an invisible force, revealing a crack that was tens of meters long. As stone chips flew everywhere, Lianping's kick directly sent out a white force that flew towards the group of bats. Wherever it passed, A large number of blood bats turned into red powder and scattered in the air. Finally, the white force hit the wall, leaving a dent that was several centimeters deep. With just one whip kick, 1/3 of the blood bats in the air were killed, leaving a large hole in the ground. Following that, Lianping twisted his waist in midair. After a few more kicks, only a few blood bats were left hovering in the air, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. At this moment, Lianping's right hand had regenerated with the infusion of soul energy. He used his right hand to grab his left shoulder and tore off his burning left arm. Then, he casually tossed his charred left arm onto the ground. On the blood demon's side, his body was once again covered in blood. The wounds all over his body were slowly wriggling. It seemed that given enough time, he would be able to recover his body once again. Blood bats continued to emerge from the blood pool. This won't do. Lianping frowned. He can use too much blood here. If this continues, there'll be no end to it. Thinking of this, Lianping was still in midair. Before he landed, he stomped on the air and charged toward the blood demon once again. When he passed by a pillar, Lianping waved his hand and sliced it open. There were many such pillars in the underground palace that were used to support the structure of the underground palace. He carried the pillar with one hand and went up to the blood demon. Then, he swung it toward the blood demon's battered body. Like a baseball, the pillar sent the blood demon flying. After smashing through over 10 pillars, the blood demon fell to the ground. This was to prevent the blood flames from burning his body once again. Then, Lianping carried the pillar and charged toward the blood demon once again. Just then, kacha-kacha sounds rang out. A door opened and many footsteps could be heard. Lianping laughed coldly. Just in time. After saying that, he swung the pillar forcefully. A strong gust of wind blew toward the door, blowing the soldiers who had charged in first onto the ground. Simultaneously, the blood demon's body was also sent flying toward the door. With a loud boom, a series of agonizing cries rang out. The blood demon's body was like a cannonball, smashing several tens of soldiers into meat paste. Then, his entire body sank into the wall. At the next moment, Lianping, who was carrying the pillar, charged into the crowd as well. The waving column seemed to have set off a storm of flesh and blood. Wherever it passed, no matter who it was, they were directly smashed into meat paste. The blood demon's body was like a baseball, and Lianping was like a ball chasing after this person, continuously hitting him toward the ground. The soldiers cried out agonizingly and looked at Lianping, who was charging toward them, in despair. Their bullets were unable to hit him. Even if they did, they would be instantly healed. The soldiers in the square could not see the situation below. They could only hear a series of booming sounds of collisions, mixed with intermittent agonizing cries. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. At the next moment, a battered body that was covered in blood and had almost turned into a pile of meat paste flew out from the underground passageway. Lianping followed closely behind. The pillar in his hand had already broken into 4 to 5 sections and was thrown to the ground. His left hand had also grown out once again. It looked as if it had never been injured before. Looking at the soldiers in front of him, Fang Xijian laughed maniacally and charged over. He waved his hands lightly, bringing about a bloody storm. With a casual grab, he threw a soldier several hundred meters away, causing him to fall to his death. With a casual punch, a few soldiers were smashed into smithereens by white cheese. With a dash, Fang Xijian sent over 10 soldiers flying. Those soldiers cried out agonizingly as they were sent flying. While they were in midair, all the bones in their bodies were shattered, and they stopped breathing. Smelling the bloody rain that he had created in the air, Lianping broke into a cruel smile. By then, the remaining soldiers had completely broken down. They wailed and fled in all directions. Lianping could not be bothered with them. He walked toward the blood demon, who was still wriggling slowly. He casually grabbed a soldier's corpse and used it as a golf club, swinging it toward the blood demon's body. There were still blood flames on the blood demon's body. Fang Shijian wanted to use this method to push the blood demon further away, far away from the blood under his feet. Chapter 166. While the blood demon was flying in midair, Lianping tossed away the corpse and stomped down hard. With a rumble, it was as if a landmine had exploded under his feet. The entire world seemed to slow down once again. Lianping leaped up next to the blood demon in midair, and struck out with his palm. In an instant the air gathered. The two of them were several tens of meters apart, and a stream of white air force struck the blood demon's body. The blood demon's body was sent flying from the explosion. Then another loud explosion rang out, and air currents scattered in all directions. The blood demon was once again struck by a stream of white air force and was sent flying up into the sky. The soldiers on the ground could only see streams of white light and thunderous explosions flashing in midair. Then two black shadows flew up into the sky, one after the other. Lianping struck the blood demon's body with his palm, one after another. The blood demon's body shattered time and time again, becoming smaller. Many pieces of flesh fell down from midair. In the end, the soldiers on the ground could no longer see the two of them. Only the sounds of explosions continued to ring out in all directions from the sky. In less than 1 minute, Lianping had struck the blood demon from the bottom up for over 1,000 meters, sending out several hundred palm strikes. Right now, the blood demon was only left with a piece of flesh that was the size of a fist, and it was wriggling slowly in midair. Having lost the environment that was filled with blood to replenish his energy, and having been continuously attacked by Lianping for so long, the blood demon was already at the end of his rope. Killing intent spread out in midair, and Lianping stared at the piece of flesh in midair. His vital energy gathered crazily toward his right fist. With his next punch, he wanted to kill the blood demon completely. Then, a shapeless shriek rang out from the piece of flesh. Ah! A sharp sound wave broke through the air and suddenly tore through the entire sky. Then, countless gushing sounds rang out from the ground. Splash, 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 splash. It sounded like the sound of a great river flowing. This is? Lianping frowned. The sound of blood flowing? As if they had been summoned by the emperor, all the animals within a range of 1,000 meters died instantly. Their bodies then exploded, and the blood in their bodies turned into streams of blood snakes that shot out into the air. Whether it was the soldiers, the ordinary staff, or even the cats, dogs, birds, and mice, they all exploded and died in an instant. They turned into tens of thousands of blood threads and soared into the sky, converging at the blood demon and Lianping. They looked like countless red meteors. Among them, the most eye-catching one was a blood dragon that emerged from the ground. It was the blood of the underground blood pool. It formed a huge blood dragon with a diameter of 1 meter and a length of more than 10 meters. It flew towards the blood demon. This was the final struggle of the blood demon before his death. After this move, the Bloodseeker would not be able to use his ability for a few months. However, at this moment of life and death, he did not have the time to think so much. Thousands and tens of thousands of bloodlines soared into the sky and converged in midair. Finally, they turned into an endless sea of blood and swept toward the blood demon in midair. The remaining pieces of the blood demon's flesh let out sounds of joy and kept on vibrating. Once the sea of blood enveloped the blood demon, his injuries would be able to recover. He could even turn the entire sea of blood into blood flames and unleash an earth-shattering attack. Just as the sea of blood was about to attack, a fair and powerful right hand with skin as delicate as that of a baby's grabbed the vibrating piece of flesh. Looking at the sea of blood that was sweeping toward him, Lianping grabbed the fist-sized piece of flesh and stuffed it into his mouth. With a few crunching sounds, Lianping swallowed the piece of meat in one bite. The blood demon was eaten by him just like that. Along the way, Li Anping's personality became more and more extreme, and his heart became darker and darker. Until today, when he faced the pressure of the Fire Dragon Vanguard and the League of Stars, he finally took this step and crossed this taboo, or should I say seal? After Li Anping swallowed the blood demon, the sea of blood that had gathered in mid-air lost control and returned to its original state. It no longer had extraordinary powers, nor the ability to fly. It directly fell from mid-air. It was as if the sky was raining blood. The blood of all the creatures within a 1-kilometer radius, as well as the blood that had gathered in the blood demon's underground palace for God knows how many years, all sprinkled down from the sky at this moment. How magnificent was this scene! It was as if the entire ground was dyed in a layer of red. After swallowing the blood demon, Li Anping felt an endless amount of power spread out from his body. Psychic energy rose up, burning on the surface of Li Anping's body like flames. Moreover, as the power in Li Anping's body grew stronger and stronger, so did the amount of psychic energy. It was like a giant fireball, burning in the sky. If an ability user passed by here and looked at the sky, they would feel as if there was an extra sun in the sky. At the center of the psychic energy sun, Li Anping's body trembled non-stop, surging power pouring out of his body in torrents. Originally, swallowing the soul of a level 5 ability user was already a great supplement, let alone now that Li Anping had eaten it along with its skin and flesh. The veins on Li Anping's forehead bulged. He felt as if something in his body had been broken through. The barrier between level 3 and level 4 was instantly broken through. The range of his soul absorption also instantly reached an astonishing 600 meters. Meanwhile, his steel-like muscles bulged one after another. Then, astral winds surged, and a gust of wind blew out from Li Anping's body in all directions. Just the trembling of his body's muscles was enough to push aside the air, forming a hurricane. Right now, Li Anping's body surpassed the limits of the human body's imagination, once again improving. Under the improvement of his body, psychic energy crazily surged out from his limbs and bones, forming a several 100-meter diameter sun-like object in the air. A few minutes later, after a wave of crazy trembling, his body stopped growing. Right now, Li Anping's physical fitness had already reached 19. 8 in strength, 19. 0 in agility, and 20. 5 in stamina. The psychic energy on his body was even more so like a brilliant sun, illuminating the great earth. Meanwhile, his ability rank had impressively reached level 4. Li Anping clenched his fist. Suddenly, he threw a punch towards the manor below him. There was a rumble. A huge white force followed Li Anping's fist and blasted toward the manor on the ground. The huge white force was about half an acre in size, and it smashed straight toward the ground. Before the force arrived, astral winds were already spreading in all directions. The huge force pushed aside the air, forming a hurricane. Large areas of the forest were blown askew, and the windows were shattered. In the next instant, the white force had already hit the ground. A series of banging sounds rang out, and the houses on the ground immediately collapsed. Faced with Li Anping's punch across the air, they were like toys made of paper, instantly shattering and turning into ruins. The feeling it gave off was as if a child had casually slapped away the sand castle he had built on the beach. As the force came into contact with the ground started to sink and cave in. Large chunks of the ground could not withstand the force and sank into the ground. The Blood Demon's underground palace was also completely buried by this attack. And this was merely a casual attack from Li Anping. Following the improvement of his physical attributes, even though they had only been increased by a few points, the effects had already reached a terrifying level. Just then, Li Anping suddenly turned his head and looked toward the sky in the distance. With his extraordinary vision, the scene that was several kilometers away instantly zoomed in on him. A fiery red figure was flying toward him at an astonishing speed. Wherever the figure passed by, the sky seemed to be dyed red. Large patches of clouds were scattered by the astonishing heat, leaving behind a long line of fire. "Zhu Rong," Lianping said calmly. "The reinforcements are quite fast." Zhu Rong was able to fly by shooting out flames, so his speed was the fastest. Therefore, he was the first to arrive. It seemed that the Netherworld King and White Short Star might arrive at any moment. Thinking of this, just as Li Anping was about to make a move, a speck of black qi suddenly emerged from the back of his head. This speck of black qi was like a speck of ink. After it fell into the psychic qi outside his body, it instantly dyed large patches of psychic qi pitch black. Li Anping felt a sharp pain coming from his brain. It was as if countless silver needles with lightning had pierced through his brain at the same time and were stirring back and forth. He could not help but hug his head with both hands. Li Anping had long gotten used to the ultra-rapid regeneration ability. He would not even frown even if he was cut into pieces. However, at this moment, he could not help but cry out in pain from his brain. At the same time, the psychic qi on the surface of his body had completely turned black. It was as if a black sun was floating in the sky. It gave off a terrifying and evil feeling. It was as if something extremely terrifying had descended. On the other side, Zhu Rong had already flown several hundred meters away. Lianping forcibly endured the waves of pain coming from his brain. He wanted to take down Zhu Rong first. At this moment, a familiar voice rang out in his mind. "Lianping, thank you for your efforts. I'll accept this body." Chapter 167. As the voice rang in Lianping's mind, he felt as if a pitch-black figure had appeared in his mind. "Black? It's you?" Lianping was shocked and angry. He felt that his body was beginning to lose control. "It's me, Lianping. You've had enough fun, haven't you? It's your turn to give me your body." Black laughed strangely. Then, Lianping felt a consciousness hovering in his mind, as if it was trying to expel and destroy his consciousness. "Give up. You have no chance of winning the war of consciousness." Lianping hugged his head with both hands. Waves of pain came from there, making him want to tear his head apart. In the world of consciousness, the part of Lianping that represented Lianping was being invaded by a large mass of black matter. The part of his body that represented Lianping was gradually decreasing. Black's figure appeared in Lianping's mind again. His body was pitch black, his feet were stepping on black flames, and there were 2 horns on his head. He looked extremely arrogant, just like the legendary demon that brought death and fear. "Lianping, if it weren't for me, you would have been a dead man. Now that I've let you live for so long, you should be satisfied." In his mind, Lianping's figure also appeared. He looked exactly the same as he did in reality. He said angrily, "Black, you did save my life. If you have any request, I won't refuse. But if you want to kill me and replace me, even an ant wants to live. How can I not resist? It's useless even if you resist." On Black's body, the pitch-black flames surged. He had already rushed towards Lianping. In Lianping's mind, the 2 different consciousnesses immediately began to fight. However, Black's consciousness obviously had the upper hand. Every punch and kick of his could smash Lianping into pieces. Although Lianping could resurrect every time he was killed in the world of consciousness, he would feel that he had become a little weaker after each resurrection, and the darkness in his mind would occupy a larger area. When Lianping and Black were fighting in the world of consciousness, Zhu Rong also rushed over. In his eyes, Lianping was holding his head with both hands, motionless. Black psyche qi surged all over his body as he slowly descended from the sky. "Lianping, how dare you come here alone?" Zhu Rong growled out while condensing 2 room-sized fireballs in his hands, darting towards Lianping and yelling, "Today, you will die right here, as my first contribution after joining the Fire Dragon Vanguard." The flame of over 6,000 degrees burned in Zhu Rong's hands, evaporating the water and twisting the surrounding air. Before the flame even approached, Lianping's hair had already turned yellow. A flame of such intensity could even melt a steel plate in an instant. Zhu Rong did not believe that Lianping could withstand his flame with only his body. He had heard that Lianping's abilities were great strength, fast speed, and regeneration. However, he was confident that with his flame, even if he could not catch up with Lianping, he could at least protect himself. What was even more amazing was that for some reason, Lianping was motionless and letting Zhu Rong attack him freely. Seeing that the flame was about 100 meters away from Lianping, Zhu Rong's lips curled into a smile. Die! Under Zhu Rong's control, the two huge fireballs flew towards Lianping, who was falling from the sky. Like the light devouring the darkness, the flame of over 6,000 degrees burned away more than half of the black psyche chi coming out of Lianping's body before it even got close. As Zhu Rong sneered and saw that Lianping was about to be swallowed by the flame, Lianping, who was holding his head, suddenly looked at Zhu Rong. At this moment, Lianping's left eye had turned completely black, while his right eye remained the same. It was indescribably creepy. Zhu Rong felt a chill in his heart when he looked at Zhu Rong. It was as if he was being stared at by something. Like a poisonous snake staring at a frog or a tiger staring at a sheep, a chill rose from the bottom of Zhu Rong's heart. Then, two different roars came out of Lianping's mouth, but they both said the same word. Get out! Get out! Then, even with Zhu Rong's eyesight, he could only see that Lianping's arm seemed to flash, and then an explosive force exploded in front of him. All the flames were extinguished in an instant, and even Zhu Rong's body, which had been spurting out flames, only had a few sparks left. Vacuum circle. Lianping had created a pseudo-vacuum with only one punch with absolute strength. After the battle with Lei Di, he had created a move to deal with lightning and fire ability users. Now Lianping was using it, and it was terrifyingly powerful. The air 10 meters around Zhu Rong was pushed away by Lianping's punch. In this situation, he couldn't even spurt out flames. Then, under Zhu Rong's terrified gaze, Lianping impatiently blew at him. A white light flashed, and Lianping's white breath had already hit Zhu Rong. With a boom, an earth-shattering force sent Zhu Rong flying into the distance. In the air, Zhu Rong felt that his internal organs were severely injured by this blow, and his body was pushed several kilometers away by this tremendous force in the blink of an eye. However, he was also out of the vacuum circle, and his body was able to spurt out flames again. The temperature in the air kept rising. Zhu Rong straightened his legs and spurted out flames in the opposite direction of himself. The flames he spurted out created a great pushing force, trying to make him stop. However, Lianping's strength was too great. With just one breath, Zhu Rong couldn't stop spurting out flames with all his might. In the blink of an eye, Zhu Rong had flown several kilometers away. He let out a loud roar, and violent flames spurted out. The entire sky seemed to be set ablaze. This time, it was finally effective. Although Zhu Rong was still flying into the distance, his speed gradually slowed down. Therefore, Zhu Rong kept spurting flames to resist the force that Lianping had hit him, and in this way, he slowed down his flying speed. After more than 10 seconds, he finally offset this pushing force and stopped in the air. However, when he looked at Lianping's position again, only deep fear was revealed in Zhu Rong's eyes. At this moment, he was already more than 10 kilometers away from Lianping's position. With just one breath, Zhu Rong was sent flying more than 10 kilometers away. He didn't dare to imagine, if Lianping really wanted to kill him just now, what was the probability of him surviving? At this moment, his internal organs were still aching faintly, and a bloody taste came out of his mouth. Therefore, Zhu Rong stopped in the air, hesitating whether he should go and fight Lianping again. The strength that the other party had shown was no longer as simple as a level 5 ability user. On the other side, Lianping, who was in the air, didn't have the time to care about what Zhu Rong was thinking. After he swatted Zhu Rong away like he was swatting a fly, his entire brain was once again plunged into endless pain. He didn't care about what was going on outside. He didn't use void step anymore and just let his body fall to the ground, putting all his thoughts into his brain. At this moment, Lianping's consciousness and Black's consciousness were still fighting in his mind. Black grabbed Lianping's head and twisted it hard, twisting his head off. Then, he pulled hard with both hands, and Lianping's body was split into two. However, a few seconds later, Lianping came back to life in the sea of consciousness again, and rushed toward the laughing Black. Black laughed crazily and said, "It's useless, it's useless. After my ability reaches the fourth energy level, all of my energy, or should I say, your psychic energy, will gather to form an incarnation. This incarnation condenses the power of the spirit and the body, and is even stronger than the original body. And now, the moment you reach the fourth energy level, I've seized control of your incarnation with my own consciousness. The current me is definitely stronger than you, and you have no experience in fighting in the sea of consciousness at all, so it's even more impossible for you to be my opponent." As he spoke, he had already killed Lianping cruelly 5 more times. The darkness in the sea of consciousness had already occupied 60% of the space. Lianping also became anxious. So that black figure formed by psychic energy is the product of my ability reaching the fourth energy level? But now it's taken over by Black. If this continues, I'll really lose. I have to think of something. While Lianping and Black were fighting in the sea of consciousness, his physical body had also fallen from midair. Just as Lianping's body was about to hit the ground, a giant hand made entirely of stone suddenly emerged from the ground and grabbed at the falling Lianping. With a bang, the giant hand closed, and had already grabbed Lianping tightly in the palm. And beside the giant hand stood a black-haired man. He looked at Lianping in the palm and said, "Why can't I feel the presence of Zhurong and the blood demon?" The stone hand trembled, and then the stone kept twisting and sinking, forming a man's face. A deep voice came from the face. "I don't know, but Lianping has been captured. I can feel that he seems to be in extreme pain, but there are no burns on his body. It might be the blood demon who did this." He asked the black-haired man, "Sir, should we seal him?" The black-haired man gave it some thought, and then looked at Lianping, who was being held by the giant hand and had a pained expression, and said, I heard that his speed is very fast. It's better to seal him first, lest there be any complications." After saying that, he reached out a hand to grab Lianping's head. His palm was like a black hole, sucking Lianping in directly. Chapter 168. The black-haired man was Pluto. The ability he used to absorb Lianping was called the Underworld. Everyone who had seen this ability, except for Bloodseeker and White Short Star, had been sucked into the Underworld. Even Zhurong, who had joined the Fire Dragon Vanguard, did not know about Pluto's ability. The Underworld was a very special ability. The condition to activate it was very simple, which was to be touched by Pluto. After activating it, the target would enter a world called the Underworld through Pluto's body. This small world was about 1,000 square kilometers in size. Creatures that were sucked into this space would be sent to a random place. As long as they were still in the Underworld, they could be revived. This meant that after being killed here, they would be revived at a random place in the Underworld. Those resurrection points and entry points all coincided with each other and had fixed positions. However, after each death, the fusion between the creature and the Underworld would deepen. After a normal person died 3 times in the Underworld, they would be completely integrated into the space of the Underworld. By then, this person could only live in the Underworld forever and would never be able to return to the real world. At the same time, they would be influenced by Pluto. They would listen to Pluto's orders and become an emotionless, mindless puppet. However, the speed of fusion with the underworld was related to the person's willpower. A normal person would fuse after dying 3 times, a soldier would fuse about 6 times, and an experienced warrior would fuse about 10 times. Aptitude users' willpower was usually stronger. For example, a level 4 aptitude user would have to die 50 times before fusing. A level 5 aptitude user would have to die more than 100 times before fusing completely. As for the way to leave the underworld, there was only one way, which was to defeat Pluto. The sky was completely covered in dark clouds. There were no stars or sun, only a blood moon hanging in the sky. It covered the entire underworld in a layer of red. This was an eternal scene in this world. There was only night in the underworld. There was no day. The place in front of them was a stone forest in the underworld. The entire stone forest was dead silent. There was not even the sound of insects, let alone birds. It was as if everything had fallen into a deep sleep. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared in the sky more than 10 meters away. After the man appeared, he did not react and directly fell to the ground with a bang, motionless. But this time, it was like a stone falling into the water, causing countless ripples. The sound of chattering could be heard in the stone forest. Coming. It's a newbie. He seems to have fainted. Where are the zombies? Are they here yet? More than a dozen people dressed in rags rushed to Lianping, who had fallen to the ground, and hurriedly lifted him up and ran away. In the crowd, a thin man with vertical pupils suddenly pointed to the back of the crowd and shouted, "They're here!" The blonde leader asked nervously, "Hawkeye, how many zombies are there?" "Boss, there are a lot of them." The man with vertical pupils called Eagle Eye stared at the depths of the stone forest. There was a large group of people with pale faces running towards them. "There are hundreds of them just from what I can see. There are more behind, at least 1,000. So many." The blonde leader shouted again, "How's the newbie?" A bald man carrying Lianping on his back shouted, "He's a level 4 ability user, but he fainted. Ordinary means can't wake him up." The blonde man nodded to show that he understood. He pointed to the 2 people in the team and shouted, "Ahoo, you 2 brothers haven't died yet. This time you 2 are responsible for the retreat. The others follow me." The 2 men stayed in the same place, and the rest of the people quickly left with Lianping. But after a few steps, Eagle Eye shouted and anxiously said, "Not only behind, there are people in front." "What?" The blonde man nervously said, "How many?" "In front, left, right." Eagle Eye trembled more and more and finally said intermittently, 5,000, 10,000, no, at least tens of thousands of zombies are rushing towards us from all directions. How is that possible? The blonde man couldn't believe it. This newbie is only a level 4 ability user. How can he attract so many zombies? I don't know. Eagle Eye's tone became more and more anxious. What should we do? They are getting closer and closer. Should we give up on this newbie? The blonde man frowned fiercely. Seeing that all the team members were staring at him, he also became a bit hesitant. They were all people who were caught by Pluto and brought into the underworld. There were many people like them in the underworld, and now all of them have united to form a resistance group. But because their numbers and combat power were too much compared to the people controlled by Pluto, they couldn't directly confront Pluto. They could only rely on escaping, rescuing, and uniting newbies to accumulate strength. At this moment, for a newbie level 4 ability user, taking the risk of their entire team dying once, was it worth it? The blonde man only hesitated for a moment, then said decisively, "Those zombies are all under Pluto's command. Every time, they act according to the people. This time, they used so much power for this newbie, there must be a reason." He turned his head and said to a woman, "Pink, use telepathy to inform the leader of our situation here, ask for support." Then he said to a middle-aged man, "Old Parker, you have died too many times, stay with the newbie later, don't come out randomly. Everyone, get into formation and wait for the leader's support. Following the blond man's words, the dozen or so people spread out around Lianping and old Parker. Since the leader had decided to fight, they had no complaint. After all, other than old Parker, the others were selected to be good at fighting, could cooperate with each other, and had fewer deaths. A few minutes later, rumbling footsteps came from all directions, and the stone forest was filled with people with pale faces. Cold sweat dripped down the blond man's cheeks, splashing on the ground. He asked worriedly, "Pink, have you informed the leader?" The woman called Pink said, "Yes, the leader said he will rush over immediately." At this moment, the swarming crowd slowed down a few hundred meters away from Lianping. These people's clothes were ragged, and their faces were pale. Their expressions were stiff, and they looked like walking corpses. They were the people who had been merged in the underworld. They had no feelings, no memories, and completely lost their consciousness. Their every move was under the command of the underworld king. Because they had completely merged with the underworld, they could be revived after death, and were immortal. Because of these characteristics, the resistance called these merged people zombies. As the zombies got closer, the atmosphere in the air became heavier. No one spoke, and they all stared at the tens of thousands of zombies. Some swallowed their saliva, and some had sweaty palms. They would sweat even if they were stared at by tens of thousands of living people, let alone tens of thousands of immortal zombies with murderous intent. The blond man in the lead pursed his lips, and his body slowly lit up with thick psychic chi. Following his action, more or less psychic chi emerged from the bodies of the dozen or so people in the team. The team members led by the blond man were all aptitude users. As psychic chi rose from their bodies, the surrounding zombies all raised their heads and opened their mouths to howl. Tens of thousands of people howled into the sky at the same time, and all of them howled like ghosts and gods. This scene brought about immense pressure. Moreover, as the zombies howled, specks of psychic chi emerged from their team as well. Most of these zombies were ordinary people. On average, there would be one aptitude user for every 5,000 of them. While the resistance faced this army of zombies, they also had to deal with 10 immortal aptitude users. Looking at the zombies howling into the sky, the blond man shouted, "So annoying!" Then, he threw a punch toward the group of zombies. As this punch was thrown, a purple light shot out. Wherever it passed, hundreds of zombies were all crushed and sent flying. This was the blond man's ability, the materialization of power. He could turn invisible power into material attacks and throw them out. As this punch was thrown, tens of thousands of zombies howled and charged toward Lianping and the others. The resistance also started to use their abilities to attack. A great battle unfolded under this blood moon. Chapter 169. In the Sea of Consciousness, Lianping and Black were still fighting each other. Casually breaking one of Lianping's arms, Black dodged his counterattack and leaped backward. He spoke softly, "Can't you feel the situation outside? We seem to have been teleported to another place. Our physical bodies are in danger now. If you don't give up resisting, I'm afraid the physical bodies outside will be killed first." Lianping snorted and charged at Black again. "Why don't you give up? You can live even without a physical body anyway, right?" As they spoke, the two of them collided again. The two of them went back and forth. A series of crackling sounds were heard. In just a few seconds, their fists and bodies had collided countless times. In the end, Lianping was punched in the face by Black. His entire body was shattered into countless pieces again. Then, he was reborn on the spot. Black sneered. "Your consciousness is getting weaker and weaker. Do you think you still have a chance of winning? Why don't you surrender now? I can still keep a trace of your soul. I'll find a chance to make you a human again in the future. My consciousness is getting weaker and weaker. Does that mean you're getting stronger? Lianping suddenly smiled. I have a physical body. So even if my consciousness is shattered, I can still reassemble it with a strong physical body. But you only have a psychic incarnation. What will happen if your consciousness is shattered? Will you reassemble it? This is in my brain. Black was stunned. He suddenly looked at his right hand and saw that a white band of light had wrapped around his right wrist. He did not know when it had appeared on his originally pitch-black body. That meant that Lianping's consciousness had begun to invade his world of consciousness. Ha 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 ha. Black laughed. Lianping, I really did not choose the wrong person. Your talent is unparalleled. You've discovered the trick of the consciousness battle in such a short time? You can enter my consciousness, and I can also penetrate your spirit. This is a collision between souls. It depends on willpower and endurance. I will never lose to you in this aspect. Lianping said indifferently, and if you are defeated by me here, even if it's only once, I will expel you from my body. Black stopped talking. Lianping was right. As the intruder of consciousness, he was like a rootless duckweed. If he did not seize the psychic incarnation in advance, he would not even be able to manifest his own consciousness to attack Lianping. Now that he was defeated, he could only retreat with Lianping's psychic incarnation. However, once he did that, how long could the psychic incarnation survive without the nourishment of Lianping's psychic incarnation? Once the psyche incarnation dissipated, Black, as its consciousness, would die as well. That was the reason why he wanted to seize Lianping's consciousness. A black shadow flashed by and Lianping's chest was punched through by Black's fist, turning him into a cloud of flesh and blood. Looking at Lianping, who was reborn, Black did not say a word and rushed forward. Since his opponent had decided to fight to the end, Black would not try to persuade him anymore. He wanted to kill Lianping again and again until his soul completely dissipated. Although Black's strength was stronger than Lianping's, if he were to be defeated once during this process, he would fail completely. This was a battle between willpower and endurance. Unbeknownst to anyone, an earth-shaking battle unfolded in Lianping's sea of consciousness. At the same time, in the underworld, the blond man threw out another punch. A purple beam of light penetrated hundreds of meters in front of him. Countless zombies were turned into dust by this punch. However, it was only delayed for a few seconds. In the next moment, the empty hole was filled by countless zombies again, and they rushed toward the blond man. In the depths of the stone forest, there was an endless stream of zombies coming out and joining the siege. Until now, just the siege of these ordinary zombies had depleted more than 30% of the man's psychic energy and physical strength. 4 of his team members had been killed and reborn. However, the number of zombies did not decrease. Instead, it kept on increasing. The man shouted again and waved his fists, blasting away a large number of zombies in the surroundings. He then shouted, "Pink, how much longer until the leader arrives?" The lady named Pink smashed the head of a zombie with a punch and shouted, "5 more minutes!" A stream of flames spewed out by a zombie flashed past Eagle Eye, and he leaped toward the blond man. "Captain!" The golden-haired man turned around, and with a single punch, a purple ball of light struck the fire-breathing zombie's body, shattering it into pieces. After turning into a zombie, regardless of whether it was an ability user or an ordinary person, they would lose their sense of self and only know how to carry out orders rigidly. Their battle prowess would be much lower than before. Their advantage was their ability to be reborn continuously and their snowballing numbers. No problem. Looking at the team members who were helping each other and struggling to kill the zombies, the blonde captain thought, 5 minutes is enough. As long as the leader arrives, we'll be safe. This time, Pluto sent so many zombies to deal with this newcomer. He must be extraordinary. Maybe our chance to turn the tables is on him. Just when the blonde captain thought that there was no problem, Eagle Eye shouted, "It's Sandstorm! He's flying over." Hearing the two words sandstorm, the blonde captain was shocked. Where? Eagle Eye pointed to the northeast and said bitterly, why would Sandstorm come over? He's a level 5 ability user. This newcomer is only a level 4 ability user. Why would they send him over? The golden-haired captain roared and swung his hand 180 degrees. A purple blade light swept through the air, directly cutting hundreds of nearby zombies in half at the waist. The team members took advantage of this opportunity, and all came to the captain's side. More than 10 people formed a circle and formed a line of defense. The blonde captain turned his head and stared at the northeast sky. A few seconds later, even he could see with his naked eye that a sandstorm was coming towards them. It really is Sandstorm. He muttered, why would they send Sandstorm for this newcomer? He thought, if this newcomer is really so important, then we can't let him go. He shouted, everyone come over. Priority is to protect the newcomer. We must wait for the leader's support. Fleetfoot, at the last moment you carry him and break out. He understood that if Sandstorm succeeded in killing everyone and the newcomer, then once they respawned, they would be besieged at other respawn points. If they encountered a respawn point that was occupied by non-resistance, then they might even be killed again. Originally, their team had only come to investigate this respawn point. They didn't expect to meet a newcomer, nor did they expect that the newcomer would attract the attention of Sandstorm. Then the most important thing now was to protect the newcomer. This newcomer was obviously very important. Otherwise, the zombies wouldn't have attacked with such force. Every time the zombies attacked a respawn point, they would arrange their forces according to the strength of the target. How long had it been since the last time Sandstorm had attacked? The blonde man couldn't remember clearly. He only knew that he had to protect this newcomer, even if he had to die once because of this. The one called Fleetfoot was a teenager. When he heard the captain's orders, he nodded seriously and didn't refute. However, there was someone who clearly didn't think this way. The one called Abao, who had originally stayed behind to cover the retreat, used the sharp claws of his hands to tear several zombies to pieces. He roared unconvinced, that newcomer is only a level 4 ability user. Is there a need to face Sandstorm head-on for him? Do we all have to die once for this newcomer? Abao's older brother who was also somewhat unconvinced. He also shouted, it's fine if you want us to sacrifice ourselves, but for a newcomer, a stranger? His level is just the same as mine. Moreover, he still hasn't woken up. Who knows what kind of person he is? The blonde captain said coldly, this is my order. If you don't want to follow it, then leave the team when we return. But before that, you must follow my orders. Abao still wanted to retort, but Ahu patted him and shook his head, telling him to stop talking. The blonde captain saw that they didn't retort, so he didn't say anything else. At this moment, even the zombies' attacks had stopped. Everyone stared closely at the sky full of yellow sand that was getting closer and closer. The earth-shattering yellow sand filled the air like a layer of yellow clouds, covering the entire sky. When the yellow sand arrived in the air above Li Anping's location, the sand had already formed a several dozen meter-long human face. The sand face opened its mouth wide, swallowing everyone on the ground. He wanted to devour all the rebels, including Li Anping, and kill them all in one gulp. Chapter 170. Seeing the yellow sand descend with the power to devour the world, the blonde captain let out a furious roar. Psychic energy frantically gathered in his right fist, and at the same time, his tightly clenched right fist emitted an astonishing purple glow. He could materialize his strength, and now, he was accumulating his strength by clenching his fist. This was equivalent to exploding with several times the strength of a single punch. Unfortunately, this kind of storage was not infinite. Even so, it was already frighteningly strong. The thick purple glow enveloped the blonde captain's entire arm, making it impossible to see what was inside. In the next moment, the huge head made of yellow sand fell to the ground with a boom, swallowing everyone in one gulp. However, this process did not last even a second. Suddenly, a purple glow emerged from the yellow sand that filled the sky. A terrifying purple beam of light, accompanied by the blonde captain's fist, broke through the head of yellow sand and rushed toward the sky. Large patches of sand were washed away, and everyone who had been swallowed was unharmed. However, before they could rejoice, a trace of despair appeared in everyone's eyes when they looked up at the sky. The scattered sand floated in the air and then gathered together again. In just a short dozen seconds, it had become the size of a small mountain. From afar, it looked like a hill floating in the air. The blonde captain panted heavily, his eyes nervously looking at the sand mountain in the sky that was growing larger and larger. His forehead was covered in sweat, and the right arm he had used to punch was trembling. That punch had consumed more than 90% of his psychic energy and stamina. However, a pure physical attack had no effect on the sand. He had only wanted to buy time with that punch. However, at present, it seemed that a pure physical attack had little effect. In the blink of an eye, the sand mountain had doubled in size, with a radius of several hundred meters. The sand mountain, which was completely made of sand, smashed toward the ground with an astonishing momentum. Before the small mountain approached, a gust of wind blew in their faces. Several people in the team even felt their legs go soft, and they sat down on the ground. Imagine a mountain falling from the sky. What kind of oppressive force was this? How frightening was this? It was simply beyond the scope of what a human could achieve. Faced with an attack like this that threw a mountain, no one present could resist. Even if the golden-haired captain was still in peak condition and could still unleash a charged attack, the mountain above him would still be helpless against him. Everyone stared blankly as the sand mountain descended from the sky. When the mountain was about 100 meters above their heads, the entire sky was covered by a black shadow. Their vision was filled with yellow sand, and they could see the bottom of the sand mountain clearly. Grains of sand fell from the top and landed on the ground. At this critical moment, when everyone was about to be smashed into meat paste, a black light shone above everyone's head. The next moment, the black light rapidly expanded, turning into a huge black plane that caught the entire mountain of sand. No, they didn't catch it. The black plane was like a spatial tunnel that led to an unknown area. All the sand disappeared after falling into it. The entire sand mountain sank into the black plane at a speed visible to the naked eye. It didn't fall on the team members' heads. After the disappearing sand mountain sank into the black plane, another similar black plane appeared about a kilometer away. Every time the sand mountain above everyone's heads sank an inch, a part of the sand mountain that had originally sunk would appear below the new black plane. This huge black plane was actually a teleportation door. It directly blocked the sand mountain and teleported it a kilometer away. A kilometer away, the huge sand mountain fell from the sky and landed on the ground. With a boom, a huge wave came from the ground, and tens of thousands of zombies were directly smashed into meat paste. Below the black spatial tunnel, the team members' faces were filled with the joy of surviving a disaster. Spatial tunnel, it's the leader. The leader is here, we're saved. The golden-haired captain saw the sand mountain break in an instant, but he wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he calmly shouted, "Everyone gather together and get ready to leave." Hearing this, the other excited people also reacted in the blink of an eye. They all gathered around Lianping, who was lying in the middle. Then, a vertical black spatial door opened above their heads, and a young girl with brown hair and a ponytail landed. "Are you guys okay? Hansen, where's that newcomer?" Hansen, who was also the golden-haired captain, pointed at Lianping and said, "It's him, I think he, no need to say anything more." The young girl with the ponytail put out her hand and said, Don't say anything more, let's leave first. As long as Sandstorm doesn't reveal his true form, he'll be invincible. If there's anything else, let's go back to the base first." Just then, a strange black figure charged toward the young girl with the ponytail from afar. The black figure's speed was extremely fast, creating a series of sharp whistles in the air. Although it hadn't broken through the speed of sound, it was already so fast that everyone couldn't see it clearly. When the young girl with the ponytail turned her head, the strange figure was only over 100 meters away from everyone. The young girl's pupils contracted slightly, and a huge spatial tunnel appeared in front of the strange figure. Once he charged in, he would be teleported to another place. After the young girl put down the spatial door, she waved her hand behind her, and a circular black spatial tunnel appeared horizontally above everyone's heads. Then it descended. As the spatial door descended, everyone's bodies slowly entered the spatial door. It looked as if they were disappearing bit by bit from head to toe. At this moment, the strange figure that was charging over had already dodged the black spatial door that appeared in front of him. However, as he continued to dash left and right, black spatial doors would appear under his feet, in front of him, left and right. However, this strange figure was still able to advance and retreat freely at such a high speed, not even once barging into a spatial door. However, although the spatial doors appeared very quickly, no matter how many there were only 2 spatial doors from the beginning to the end. This meant that there were only a total of 3 spatial doors, including the ones that teleported everyone. In the blink of an eye, he was only over 10 meters away from the young girl with the ponytail, and everyone had already entered the spatial doors and been teleported away. The strange figure let out a furious roar and pounced toward the young girl. His claws slashed through the air, bringing with them a hint of red light. Suddenly, there was a fishy smell in the air, and streams of green claw shadows were already grabbing toward the young girl. "Wolf!" A hint of hatred flashed in the young girl's eyes, but behind the strange figure, a huge amount of sand was swarming over. They formed countless sand giants that rushed toward the young girl, and the huge force caused the entire city to tremble non-stop. The young girl took one last deep look at the strange figure. It was a monster with long black fur all over, and it looked like a werewolf. The next moment, a black spatial door appeared behind the young girl, and after turning around, the young girl with the ponytail had already disappeared. The green claw shadows slashed through the young girl's afterimage, leaving only a strand of hair behind. The werewolf that was left behind roared angrily on the spot. When the countless zombies around heard this roar, they instinctively trembled. After Li Anping in the underworld was rescued, Xia received news that Li Anping had been killed by the Fire Dragon Vanguard a day later. Xia Dragonfinch, who had almost stopped working, was completely paralyzed now. Including Lu Xing, no one from top to bottom could work in peace. After losing Li Anping, who was a level 5 fighter, Xia Dragonfinch was now like a little lamb that had to face the threat of the League of Stars and the Fire Dragon Vanguard alone. The Dragon Sparrow Guards gathered every day to discuss what to do, but the number of people attending the gatherings was decreasing. Whether it was the leader of the League of Stars who had advanced to level 6, or the Fire Dragon Vanguard who had advanced to level 5, it was like an insurmountable gap in front of them, leaving them with no way to deal with it. A few days later, the emissaries of the Ice Fortress and the League of Stars arrived at Xia one after another, and a ceasefire agreement between Xia and the Ice Fortress was put on the agenda. Under these circumstances, the contents of this agreement were naturally unfavorable to Xia. Not only Xia Dragonfinch, but Xia's entire military might be suppressed. Once this agreement was signed, not only would Xia have to castrate the Special Task Force, which was Xia Dragonfinch, they would also have to give up a large portion of their economic and political benefit. The League of Stars would also enter Xia's territory. Although the 3 sides were still in negotiations, to Great Xia, who was at an overwhelming disadvantage in terms of ability user strength. Even if they could salvage some unfavorable factors on the negotiation table, their future was still bleak. The emissaries of the two sides were only a prelude. 10 days later, in Desia's ice fortress, the upper echelons of the League of Stars and the upper echelons of ability users would gather at the border to finalize the terms of the ceasefire agreement and sign it on the spot. At the same time, on the other side of the ocean in the western continent, a man named Shang Zhenhai let out a soft sigh. Unfortunately, father, little brother, I was still a step too late. I can't personally avenge you. Beside him, a pregnant woman with bright eyes and white teeth comforted him. It's all right, Zhenhai. Father and Zhenbang will only feel relieved when they hear this news. In the end, that Li Anping is just a lucky bastard who awakened a decent ability. You, on the other hand, are destined to dominate this land and sky. You don't have to take it to heart. This woman was actually Wei Shishir, who had been sent by Song Bang to the Western Continent's Armist Federation to hook up with Shang Zhenhai. At this time, Wei Shishir looked like she had been pregnant for several months. Her entire body was filled with the radiance of a mother. Shang Zhenhai was currently favored by the leader of the League of Stars, the Queen of Heaven. He was a well-known genius among the younger generation of the League of Stars, and was believed to be the strongest of the younger generation in the future. Song Bang was able to receive this news half a year ago and make the decision to befriend him. Clearly, his connections with the League of Stars, as well as his own judgment, were extraordinary. Unfortunately, he could no longer use this connection. Chapter 171. In the underground base in Tianjing, Li Qian, Lu Xing, Yang Guang, and Lu Feng were gathered together. Li Qian looked at Lu Xing anxiously and asked, "Has it been confirmed?" "Sir, he really." Lu Xing lowered his head and replied with a dejected expression, "According to the news sent by the Fire Dragon Vanguard, after Sir killed the Blood Demon, he was personally defeated by the Netherworld King, who rushed over after hearing the news. How could this be? Didn't you say that you would come back?" Li Qian's face was filled with disbelief. Tears flowed out of her eyes like water as she stumbled out of the door. Yang Guang stood up and blocked her path, asking, "Li Qian, where do you think you're going?" Li Qian clenched her teeth and said while crying, "I want to go to the ice fortress. I want to look for him. I don't believe that he's dead just like that." "Are you crazy?" Lu Xing frowned and said, "If Sir is still alive, he'll naturally appear. If Sir is really dead, then what's the point of you going to the ice fortress? You're just sending yourself to your death." "I don't care." Li Qian was crying so hard that one couldn't help but feel sorry for her. "I must look for him." Seeing this, Lu Xing sighed and said, "Yang Guang, do it." Li Qian looked at Yang Guang in astonishment. She saw him suddenly flash behind her and hit her neck with a karate chop. Then, she fainted. Yang Guang helped the unconscious Li Qian back to her seat. He looked at Lu Xing and said, "We can't let her stay unconscious forever. At least let her calm down." Lu Xing sighed. "Do you think that Sir has really been defeated and killed? Such a powerful person." Lu Feng's tone revealed an unusual calmness. "The emissaries from the League of Stars and the Ice Fortress have already arrived in the Imperial City. This information shouldn't be wrong. To be able to fight against several level 5 ability users and kill the Blood Demon by himself is already an astonishing achievement. What we should be thinking about now is not the authenticity of the information, but what we should do if Sir fails." Lu Xing nodded. He was also immersed in shock and disbelief at Li Anping's failure. After all, with the strength Li Anping displayed, it was always surprising that he died so easily. This was especially so for those in the Great Xia Dragonfinch. They knew Li Anping's strength better than outsiders. However, he now understood that Lu Feng was right. No matter how powerful Li Anping was in the past, his death was meaningless. What was more important now was how Xia Dragonfinch was going to deal with the upcoming League of Stars and Ice Fortress, and what would they and their subordinates do in the armistice agreement. Immediately, the two of them began to discuss various aspects. However, when they heard the two of them discussing how to preserve their strength, how to deal with the pressure from the Ice Fortress and the League of Stars, as well as the arrangements for the Dragon Sparrow Guards and the 8th Research Institute, Yang Guang didn't say a word. Yang Guang, don't you have anything to say? Lu Xing glanced at Yang Guang and asked. I don't have anything to say. When Yang Guang heard this, he suddenly stood up and walked towards the door. This isn't the first time there's been news that isn't favorable to Master. Every time, Master has returned victorious. I believe this time won't be an exception. Also, didn't Momo say that Master's second ability didn't stop or disappear? The monitoring system is still operating every day. This means that Master isn't dead. Yang Guang turned his head, his eyes filled with fervor. Master's growth in strength is obvious to all of you. One day, he will become the strongest human in the world. Therefore, I will quietly wait for Master's return. Looking at Yang Guang's departing figure, Lu Xing and Lu Feng didn't say a word. Both of them were silent, and no one knew what they were thinking. While some of the leaders in the base were thinking about Xia Dragonfinch's future, the soldiers below were also thinking about something. At the bar, Yan Bei finished the large glass of beer in front of him. Beside him, Tang Weihan, who had transformed into a teenager, was holding a glass of milk and staring at the beautiful women dancing on the stage. At this moment, someone suddenly sat beside Yan Bei and asked in a friendly tone, "Why are you drinking alone? Aren't you bored?" Yan Bei glanced at him. It was Zhuomai, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. He didn't care about Zhuomai. He raised his glass and knocked on the table. Another glass of cold beer. Zhuomai already knew about Yan Bei's arrogance. Seeing that Yan Bei didn't care about him, he laughed. Lianping is dead. What do you plan to do in the future? Hearing Zhuomai's words, Tang Weihan, who was holding a glass of milk, turned his head and stared at Zhuomai. Zhuomai smiled at him and said, "The last time I was on a mission, I met people from the Wang family. Guess what they said to me?" Yan Bei snorted. "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush." Zhuomai laughed. "The two of you, do you want to consider going to the Wang family with me?" Looking at the two of them, Zhuomai said seriously, "Xia Dragonfinch is about to collapse. Do you want to die with him? A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. The Wang family's offer is quite good. If we go now, the League of Stars and Ice Fortress won't blame us for Xia Dragonfinch. Think about it carefully." After that, Zhuomai patted Yan Bei's shoulder and left without looking back. After watching Zhuomai leave, Tang Weihan drank a few mouthfuls of milk. Finally, he couldn't help but ask Yan Bei, "Do you plan to go?" "I don't know," Yan Bei shook his head and mumbled. "Do you think the monster Lianping is really dead? I don't think it's that simple." On the rooftop of a tall building, Sun Hao sat on the edge of the roof. His legs were dangling as if he was going to fall off at any moment. He was holding a bottle of wine in his hand. He raised his hand and drank the last mouthful of wine before throwing it behind him. The bottle hit the ground and shattered into pieces. Near the pieces there were more than 10 broken bottles. Qian Duoduo pushed his wheelchair out from the corridor. He frowned when he saw the bottles on the ground. He then reached out his hand towards Sun Hao. An invisible telekinesis rushed towards him and lifted Sun Hao up in front of him. Sun Hao was shocked. He then saw Qian Duoduo and laughed. He said drunkenly, "Why are you here? How about it? Do you want to have a drink with me? Lu Xing and the others are looking for you everywhere. Do you know that?" Qian Duoduo asked calmly. Sun Hao burped and said carelessly, "So what if they're looking for me? What's the point of looking for me in this situation? I'm not Lianping. I can't fight my way to the ice fortress alone. After a moment of silence, Qian Duoduo asked, Are you angry at him? I'm angry at myself. Sun Hao sighed and said, I understand why he doesn't want to bring us along. In a battle between level 5 ability users, we might just be a burden. But I really want to help. Even if it's just to delay them for a few seconds and attract their attention, maybe the situation wouldn't be as bad as it is now. As he said this, Sun Hao clenched his fists tightly, the veins on his fists popping out. Moreover, as Sun Hao's fists clenched tighter and tighter, traces of electricity also appeared. When Qian Duoduo saw Sun Hao like this, he took a deep breath and said slowly, I know that right now, no matter what I say to you to calm down, endure silently, work hard to become stronger, and take revenge 10 years later, you won't listen. But Qian Duoduo's expression changed and said, Do you really think Lianping is dead? What do you mean? Sun Hao looked at Qian Duoduo in confusion. A body that can exceed the speed of sound, strength of at least 1,000 tons, and even now, it still hasn't reached its limit. There's also the rapid regeneration ability that breaks through human common sense. There's also the ability to learn as if it's an instinct in battle. Looking at the surprised Sun Hao, Qian Duoduo smiled confidently and said, Strange, how do I know this so clearly? To deal with someone, you have to understand them first. I don't trust Lianping as much as you do. But it's because of this that the more I collect information on him, the more I understand how terrifying he is. It's very hard for me to believe that he died so easily. Even if he was facing 4 level 5 ability users, until I actually see his body, I won't completely believe that he's dead. Sun Hao nodded vigorously, his eyes seemed to have recovered some vitality. You're right, maybe Lianping really isn't dead. If he's not dead, then we might still have a chance against the League of Stars and the Ice Fortress. Qian Duoduo nodded, but a trace of sadness flashed through his heart. Although he said this, he didn't know how much comfort there was in his words. Qian Duoduo only had less than 10% confidence that Lianping was still alive. He thought to himself, no matter what, we have to prepare for the worst. Chapter 172. In Tianjing, the members of Xia Dragonfinch were not the only ones who had different reactions to the news of Lianping's death. The various forces were also making their own judgments about Lianping's death. The Zhang family of the 9 great royal families had been completely excluded from the 9 great royal families because they had previously joined Lianping's side. The Zhang family's forces had been completely wiped out, and they were losing millions of people every day. Some of the first-rate and second-rate families that were on good terms with the 9 great royal families in the past had changed their minds and were itching to step on the Zhang family. The non-governmental organizations that were usually firmly suppressed by Xia Dragonfinch couldn't help but emerge at this moment and form ties with the 9 great royal families. In the living room of a club, the head of the Li family, Li Wei, was lying on the sofa with a wine glass in his hand. He said cheerfully, Lianping, that little bastard, is finally dead. Wang Chong should also give up. As long as the ceasefire agreement is completed, there will be no obstacles in the League of Stars. Song Guozhong sneered at the side. Wang Chong still doesn't understand that there are no 1,000-year-old dynasties, only 1,000-year-old families. Now that the League of Stars is strong and the Queen of Heaven has reached the 6th energy level, she is already the strongest person in the world. How long can we hold on to Xia? Why don't we join the League of Stars like Dongyang? With the League of Stars as our backing, with the power of the League of Stars and the power of our families, no one in the Eastern continent can compete with us. It's a win-win situation, a bald middle-aged man interrupted. He was the head of the Qian family, Qianda. The club they were in was the most high-end private club in Tianjing. It had always been the place where the 9 great royal families gathered. Apart from the 9 great royal families, only some of the first-rate wealthy families could enter. Recently, the Zhang family had also been disqualified from entering. Clearly, the suppression of the Zhang family was completely out in the open. On the other hand, because the Zhang family had been severely suppressed, the One Qi sect had also stopped providing financial compensation after receiving the news of Li Anping's death, which directly caused the 8th Research Institute to be half paralyzed. Sherwin said angrily, "What's going on? Why did you pull away the funds at such a crucial time? Do you know that our research has reached the most critical point? If it succeeds, it might change the entire history of mankind." Wei Zhuan sighed and said, "I don't know the details. Anyway, the government suddenly stopped funding. I couldn't get through to the Lord either." After that, the two of them continued to discuss the solution, thinking about how to contact Li Anping and which government department to contact. Should he look for the few ability users who were in charge of guarding this place some time ago? He even thought of exporting some of the research results in exchange for funds to tide over the current situation. However, because they didn't understand the current situation, they couldn't make a judgment. At this time, the weakness of Li Anping's control over the 8th Research Institute was highlighted. It was because he was the only one who had full control over the Research Institute. Other than him, no one else had full authority to understand the Research Institute. Once something happened to him and they couldn't contact him, the entire Research Institute would fall into chaos. Just as the two of them were frowning and didn't know what to do, Yang Guang kicked open the door and walked in. He asked Scorpion, who was leading the way behind him, "Are they the ones?" Scorpion nodded. "I've been here several times. Judging from the way the Lord is talking to them, they should be in charge of the 8th Research Institute." Yang Guang glanced at Wei Zhuan and Sherwin, saying, "Lord Li Anping will be leaving for a period of time. I'll be in charge of the defense of the Research Institute. I won't care about your specific work, nor do I have the right to know the secrets of the Research Institute. But if you have any requests or problems, you can tell me at your discretion and I'll help you solve them. During the period when the Lord is away, I'll be in charge of protecting the Research Institute." Wei Zhuan and Sherwin were overjoyed to hear this. They immediately brought up the problem of the lack of funds. Yang Guang frowned. This was not a problem he was good at solving. However, Lu Xing should be able to temporarily allocate a portion of de Xia Dragonfinch's funds to support the needs of the Research Institute. Just as the discussion between the few of them was getting more and more heated, Scorpion suddenly turned his head and looked outside the door. "Who's there?" Yang Guang, Sherwin, and Wei Zhuan all looked outside the door and saw a young man with a head full of blonde hair walking in. His psychic energy kept surging like flames, and his power was extremely shocking. "It's you!" Yang Guang shouted, recognizing that the person was Jin Guang. Sherwin looked at Jin Guang and said, "Why did you come out? Your injuries haven't fully healed yet, have they?" Seeing Scorpion and Yang Guang at daggers drawn, Jin Guang waved his hand. "Don't be nervous. I just want to help." The situation in reality was constantly changing. De Xia was facing an unprecedentedly severe situation. Most people believed that Li Anping had died. In the underworld, a spark that was about to ignite the entire world had already lit up. In a damp underground cave, Li Anping's body was lying on a stone bed. Although his body was motionless, his expression was ferocious. His brows were tightly knitted, as if he was experiencing a nightmare. Beside him, a green-haired young man's hands were emitting green light, which enveloped Li Anping's body. A moment later, he retracted the light from his hands. Behind him, the ponytailed girl who had saved the entire team from the sandstorm asked anxiously, "Kevin, how is he?" "I can't, Emma." The young man named Kevin shook his head. "His body isn't damaged. I can't heal him." "His body isn't damaged? Then why is he still unconscious?" The brown-haired ponytailed girl, Emma, was puzzled. Is his brain damaged? If you can't heal him, then we can only kill him and let him be reborn in the underworld. It's not a problem with his body. Kevin hurriedly stopped Emma. He clearly knew this young lady's temper. If he spoke a few seconds later, she might really beat him to death. Brain, organs, muscles, nerves, there's nothing wrong with his body. On the contrary, he's very healthy. No, it should be said that he's ridiculously strong. I even suspect that he's not human. Then why isn't he waking up? Emma looked at Li Anping on the stone bed and asked. This time, in order to kill him and let him merge with the underworld, 2 level 5 ability users, Sandstorm and Wolf, came. This person must be very special to the Underworld King. Perhaps he has the ability to help us escape from the underworld. Kevin nodded and explained, the reason he's not waking up should be a problem with his mind. I feel that his brain waves have been very active, very similar to the feeling of dreaming. I guess he might have fallen into some kind of mental attack. Mental attack, Emma muttered. What should we do? We don't have any strong mental ability users here. To create a mental attack of this level. Emma's eyes flashed with a cold light. Then can't we just kill him? Anyway, he'll be reborn in the underworld. If there's no other way, we can just kill him once and let him escape from the mental attack state. Then, we can save him before he's merged. It's useless. Kevin smiled bitterly and shook his head. The rebirth in the underworld only rebuilds the body. It doesn't relieve the mental state. Otherwise, there wouldn't be something like merging. Then what do we do? Do we really have to go find that woman? Emma frowned and said. Kevin sighed and didn't say anything. Just as the two were at a loss of what to do about Li Anping's situation, Hansen suddenly rushed in. Leader, it's bad. Lodger led the team to look for food and was surrounded. You have to go save them. Got it. The moment she finished speaking, Emma had already stepped into the portal and disappeared. After seeing Emma disappear, Hansen couldn't help but look at Li Anping, who was lying on the stone bed, and asked, Master Kevin, how is he? Not good. He should have fallen into some kind of mental attack before the Underworld King sent him here. Kevin sighed. I'm afraid we have to find that master. Just as the two of them were chatting idly, and were getting increasingly pessimistic about the underworld situation, a black portal suddenly appeared in the air. More than a dozen people fell out at once, followed by a huge pile of food. Finally, Emma leaped out and snapped her fingers, and the portal disappeared. Only angry roars could be heard before the portal disappeared. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.